All right. Thank you for being patient with us. We're a little bit late, but we'll go ahead and get started with our work meeting for the Harriman City Council on Wednesday, October 14th, 2020. We will begin with the review of tonight's agenda. Looks like we do, staff has requested that we switch item 2.2 and 2.3 just to allow continuity with the presenter. Does anybody have any issues with that? Awesome. So we will go ahead and switch that. Any other items that need to be adjusted for today? I would need a motion to reorder the agenda.
I will make a motion that we reorder the work agenda and place item 2.3 after 2.1.
No second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any other items that we need to adjust? Okay, awesome. Next is future agenda items. Any future agenda items council members would like to see on the agenda?
Just as a follow-up, there was a discussion that I began, I guess, a list of items that I made on, let me just make sure I have the right date here. On 9/20, about some proposed changes to our packets and process and some of those things. I'd like to just review that conversation as a group and make sure we get into that just a little bit. So I'd like to add that to
A future agenda?
future agenda item, yeah.
I don't see any issue with that.
One additional item, and I know we'll speak about it tonight, so it may or may not be needed as a future discussion item, but a conversation with the full council just regarding, we'll see how tonight's discussion goes, but regarding the CARES Act funds that the city has received and kind of the status of those and potential additional funds coming into the city.
Okay.
And this is I've already brought this up, and I know it's on our tracking listing, but I thought that we were going to talk about it in our combined meeting, just about the commercial around here. So do you know when we will be talking about that?
We're proposing it on the upcoming joint meeting, which we're going to have to move some meetings around in November and December because of the holidays and some things that we need to get done. But we're going to propose that joint meeting on December 16th.
Okay, because I was thinking we weren't going to have another one this year, but we are.
We're going to try to fit that in.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Awesome. And I believe this might be something that is on our task list. But one of the things I would like to see, and I know it's coming very swiftly, is an update on the public works, public safety facilities. It's my opinion that we need to start working on that a little bit more proactively to start getting those moving. As I was out at the parks facility the other day, and you guys have not enough space. So we need to start working on that. So if we can get an update on that in a meeting fairly soon, we'd appreciate it. Any other items? Okay, we will go on to item 1.3, Council Leadership Task List Review. Let me get that up.
I guess I could have waited till you pulled that up and brought that up then, sorry.
So staff is going to go through and consolidate some of these items. Some of them are repeats. So we'll go through and clean that up a little bit in the next week.
Can we add the public safety, public works to this project?
Yes,
to this list? Thank
have
you.
it on my list. Jackie
Awesome.
and I'll get it added.
Any other items or questions on this list? Okay, if not, we will move on to item 2.1, Wasatch Hills Master Development Agreement Amendment Discussion. Blake, who...
Hey. Feel more comfortable speaking with that off, so. Okay, I just, to start off, while the presentation's coming up, I want to recognize John Lindsley is here in the audience to represent the owner of this property. And if you have any questions, he's available to answer those. So, okay, so the first thing, this isn't the first time we've heard this discussion about the MDA amendment. Put a little timeline together just to kind of refresh everyone's memory about what we've talked about and where we're at. And the last presentation, there was a question that came up from the council about if the proposed land use plan aligns with the 2008 general plan per their original MDA. And so that's what this discussion centers around, is the comparison of the proposed land use plan and the general plan. So, next slide, please. And then if you click it, I got a little animation. This is our vicinity map, as was requested by Councilman Shields at the last meeting. And the little yellow area shows you where we're talking about, down in the corner. So, anyway, that's the area down south in the corner of Harriman. So, next slide, please. I put some highlights together on the proposed land use plan. One of the things I wanted to point out, if you click once, there should be another animation that lights up. RSL was removed. We talked about that last time, but I just want to highlight it again. The owner originally had asked for units associated with the RSL property. They have since came back and taken that request out, so there are no units associated with the RSL property. Can we go back to that last one? Sorry. The key points, we have about 600 plus acres. One key thing to look at is this, there's some property that added acres to their MDA, or proposed to add acres to their MDA, and it brings in a lot of open space. So the total open space with this development, if you realize, if you look at what's provided, what's existing out there right now, all the open space is on the uphill side, the undeveloped area, and it's about 190 acres of open space that'll be dedicated to Harriman. With a regional park, if you look down between pods 12 and I think 13, there's a regional park planned in there as well. So those are some key points. One other thing is the multifamily stacked. I'll get into that in a minute. That was the area that was, a lot of that was pod 35 and 39, which was in Rosecrest MDA and has since been taken out. So we'll talk about that in a second. Next slide, please. So this is the comparison that was done. We used our GIS folks downstairs, and they put we got the AutoCAD, the CAD drawings from the developer. We were able to put those into our GIS, pull a comparison, and look and see how everything lined up. So the key things that I wanted to point out was commercial use was increased greatly by about a little bit over 17.6 acres. The parks and open space went up considerably. The low-density housing went down acre-wise, and the medium-density housing also went down. The one thing I wanted to point out here is in the original MDA, they had some land uses that were listed, and they call it multifamily stacked and multifamily townhome. Those uses aren't in our general plan, but they were in the original MDA as it came through, and so they've been working with that all along since 2008. It best lines up with the medium and higher density stuff. So the general plan allows for, as you can see down there, 9.5 acres of high density and 43.5 acres of mixed use. And the mixed use in 2008 was up to 30 units per acre. And so that's where I wanted to come back to the pod 35 and 39 discussion. You can see the two squares that are pods 35 and 39 on the left-hand side of the map. There's a lot of the purple color in there. That would be up to 30 units per acre. So with this plan, you actually get less housing units than you would have with the Rosecrest plan. So that's...
So it's an overall, it's a decrease in the density overall.
Yep.
How many acres of that mixed use I can't see it on the screen. How many of the acres of mixed use was on that original plan? Because that would have had a commercial component to it, correct?
It would have had some commercial component. It turns out kind of interesting. I was talking with the planning group about the mixed use, and it was interesting. The mixed use idea when in 2008 was more of a kind of, you've got some, I don't know, all sorts of different mixed uses. It wasn't the mixed use that we're seeing now. And so, but there was some commercial.
Can you explain that just a little
there.
bit more?
So what were they, I can't remember what they were saying. Might need some help from Michael. I was talking with Bryn about it. She was around back in those days and I wasn't. And so it was more of a, I think they were thinking of using all sorts of different commercial uses inside of that. Yeah, can you elaborate on that a little bit, Michael?
Yeah, I had a brief conversation with Bryn about this afternoon. When the east area general plan was prepared and adopted by the city council. It allowed a range of density up to 30 dwelling units per acre. But when the city actually ended up adopting our mixed-use zoning regulation, we were now talking between 10 and 20 units per acre, or 10 and 15, I believe, actually. So we were probably anticipating in the general plan a higher density, but when we actually created the zoning tools, we actually reduced that quite a bit.
So my question, I think, is more on what kind of commercial would we have seen in that area? Are we talking about, insurance companies, like insurance agents? I mean, because that's where I've seen in other parts of the city is basically a single owner hair salon, and a couple of insurance companies, some other weird, daycares, that kind of stuff. Is that what we would have expected in that area?
They are really focusing on retail and retail services. Of course, they're still hoping that there'll be a market for hotel at some point in time in this center. Offices will certainly be part of it.
In your opinion, then, is the increase in commercial that we see on the new plan, does that offset the fact that we're removing the multi-use from those other areas?
Yeah, essentially what we're seeing is because there's an increase in commercial, we're seeing a decrease in residential.
And you see that as a relatively equal exchange between these two plans, is that
I think
correct?
that's in line with our objectives as a city, yes.
I was a little confused on the question there, but yeah, as I was standing off the side, it came a little bit more clear to me. The retail that is being proposed there now on pods 35 and 39 far exceeds the retail I believe we would have gotten with the mixed use.
That's the question I'm asking. Is it a better option for us as a city in regards to commercial by having this bigger commercial plot versus having some mixed use?
Okay. Let's see, and then I pointed out the land uses that weren't exact, but they seem to be generally consistent with the general plan. And so what I really compared was I needed to look at land uses based on acreage, and then the next slide we'll talk about number of residential units. And so this
Blake.
also shows that,
Blake, sorry, real quick, back to that other slide, and you might have this in another one. I just had a hard time locating it as I reviewed this. So can you tell us where we see a decrease in low-density housing down by 96.64 acres? Where was that planned? And in what now? I mean, obviously, we see some increases in commercial, some increases in park and open space, but we've seen a decrease in low and medium-density housing. Obviously, that doesn't, simple math obviously doesn't correspond with the slighter increases we're seeing too. So I'm guessing that we're seeing increases in what was proposed as that higher density across the board there, and what areas are those in?
so you can see down near the RSL complex, because we were comparing everything that had happened, and everything around the RSL complex is already constructed. You can see there was a lot of low density down there. And I think in 2017, when RSL was announced, the owner came in and shifted a lot of density down around the RSL complex. And so you can see there's a lot of low density down there that was replaced. So I think a lot of the acreage of low density housing went from there. There's also a little bit up on the hill, a little bit negligible, but most of it is down around that South Hills Pod 2.
But you kind of said a key word there for me, and that is that density was shifted to closer, which I get down there around RSL. But when you do a density shift, in my mind, that should have opened up some medium or lower density housing someplace else because there was a shift in that density, but we're not necessarily seeing that, correct?
Yeah, we didn't change the 08 general plan then. We just changed their land use plan. So, yep, that's.
Okay.
I think that's where it gets lost in translation a little bit because we had all these land use plans that were changed in time, but the general plan stayed consistent all the way through. You have a question?
Sorry, the puzzled look on my face. I'm trying to make sure I understand this. Let me be more specific. It kind of piggybacking on what Clint's question is. I saw that in the original plan, we were getting 408 low-density housing units, and now we're getting 44 low-density housing units. I'm not sure that where it happened, we lost 360 low-density housing units, and now we're getting, it looks like all of that shift into the multifamily stacked or multifamily townhome density.
And I do believe if we look at the pods, can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, I keep having to jump all over on slides, John.
Don't, it's our fault, not yours.
So if you look at the density on those, I can't remember what pod it is, but it's the Staker parcels. The density on that is really extremely low. So they're looking at a lot bigger lots. They were looking at 1 acre plus size lots up on the Staker property. So,
And
so you're
just to be
ending up
clear,
with
which
really
one's the-
large lots instead
Which
of
one's the staker?
I can't remember. It's kind of where the squares come
Kinda
out. It's
basically
just
the
below
square.
that.
Okay,
low density
that's what I
stuff
thought. I
there.
just wanted to check, make sure.
So we're replacing 1 acre lot or bigger homes with what?
They're just taking off that acreage instead of putting the 1.8 units per acre on there. They're getting 1 or 0.5
So they're,
overall.
they're making larger lots, not smaller lots. So you don't have as many homes because the residents,
Because they're making
they're
larger
making
lots.
big
Overall,
lots,
the lots are larger.
rather than just on a quarter acre lot.
That is the part I was not connecting in there. Thank
And
you.
perhaps when I'm done, John may be able to come up and elaborate a little bit more on that.
Thank you.
He's very familiar with his land use plan and what he's shifted and moved around.
So while he's sitting there, if he needs to look it up, we'd like to see the average lot size between that one and this one, if you by chance have it.
Okay. And so the last slide I have here is we took the general plan. Oh, that was the last slide. Yep. I didn't have a question slide put on the end, but anyway. So we took the general plan and we took the allowable units based on the uses and gave a min and a max. And so you can see the minimum number of units would be 1251, the max 3621. Then we looked at their adopted existing land use plan, the one that was adopted in 2017, and the planned, and did a comparison, and the unit number falls right in line. So I think the words that were said last time was, did the open space, was there a big wholesale change in open space? And we didn't recognize that. Was there a big wholesale change in any type of use? We didn't really recognize that. There were some changes, but the general plan is just that. It's kind of general. The lines don't really line up right with parcel lines. They're a little bit overlapping. And so it appears that their unit count falls in line with where it should. Their land use plan generally follows. They have the open space that they had said they were going to have. I also turned on the 30% slope here. You can see the red hatching shows a lot of the open space lines up with that, which makes sense. That's what we normally see. And then the density seemed to have been placed down along Mountain View Corridor and along the major corridors. So with
Which,
that,
to be fair, is something we've said as the body that we want, is that density along Mountain View corridor.
and that's how the general plan was written up and shows it. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may
Yeah,
have.
I just have one comment. It looks like the area that in the new land use plan that would be the regional park is saying, has a piece right through it that's a 30-degree slope. What are we gonna do there?
Remember, a lot of this is in the Staker
Grading.
conditional use plan to grade, and they have some significant grading up there. So I imagine that area
So it's
will,
currently the 30 degrees is what this is saying, but that's not what it's going to be when the park is created.
so remember, the 30% slope ordinance came in after their MDA was adopted. So they're vested underneath the old MDA, so they can grade in the 30% slope up in that area. So yeah,
Got it, okay. Sorry, we had this conversation in another meeting about what percentage of land is on the slope and usable and accessible to the city, the residents, that kind of thing, so.
this
thank you for
project has a
clarifying
lot
that.
of layers to the onion, so.
So just so that I understand, and this is not a positive or negative, when they do come in and grade that, do they still have to take the unbuildable reduction in open space? Or once it's flat and graded, do they get to count that at 100% for the open space?
We'll have to defer to planning on that one. I'm not sure if they have the reduction in the open space based on
Because
slope.
if I'm wrong, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that if it's over a certain grade, they only get a certain percentage credit towards that as open space. Because they can't take a unbuildable piece of land and just say, that's all my open space and
But was that vested prior?
But that's
I think
my
I
question.
think they're vested prior to that. This
Vested
is a
prior to
pretty
that
old
becoming-
MDA.
Coming into play.
I think so too.
so that's my question. Can we verify that through planning and just so that we can make sure, and it's not that I really am hung up either way. I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page on that.
I'm getting texts right now that are saying it was, the reduction wasn't in the '08 ordinance. So they get to count it as 100%.
I absolutely believe that, so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Luckily, I got text on my watch. So, okay, that was a great question, though. And if we hear anything different, we'll let you know, but I believe that it's vested that they get the 100% open space, no matter the slope.
No matter the slope. So then it's, okay, so then it won't matter if it's graded or not. Okay.
Would actually be advantageous to us if they graded it down below.
Yeah, for sure. More usable.
What I'm thinking is I much prefer the open space layout in the new plan, how it's through the neighborhoods like that. There's the big regional park. I think there's a lot of good that's been done here. I just want to make sure that, it's a pretty color on this map, but it's not in 3D here. So I'm trying to figure out what of it would be, usable, accessible space to the community, and what of it would just be 30-degree hillside that's really not usable, except for the crazy hikers, so.
Yeah, however, there are a lot of our residents who think that is the best kind of
Yeah, I understand that too, right?
And Wendy has heard from every single one of them.
There is a drainage up through there called Wood Hollow, and it's
Yeah.
managed by FEMA, and so that's kind of the untouchable area. But that's just south. It's the big red area that's kind of south of what they're developing here. You can see the big loop in the road on the right hand, on the map on the right-hand side, and it's just south and east of there is where Wood Hollow runs through. So that's the only part that's really untouchable based on FEMA.
This is on Planning Commission tomorrow, is that correct?
This is on Planning Commission for recommendation
For
tomorrow.
recommendation.
And then if, we're hoping to get everything put together to the council, so in the next meeting, it can be on for decision if
That'd be
we
the
don't have any further questions.
Our next meeting, the 28th. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I do have a kind of a sidebar question on this whole thing. It's been a while since we talked about the parking structures under commercial. Can you update me on what's going on that? Because I'm unsure.
Great question.
Quite frankly.
Crunched a bunch of numbers a couple months ago, and then we found out we didn't have all the invoices. We've since gotten all those invoices. I've had them for quite a while, and I need to sit down and go through it. It's pretty tedious work, and so my plan is, I talked to Wendy about this last week, tomorrow is my day to crunch through that and get down to it. I think I have a good idea, but I need to touch base with Alan when I get there and make sure that we're not missing anything.
Once we get that down, can we get that on an agenda, please?
Yeah,
Thank you.
it would be great if it could even come the same time we're considering all of this, because I think that was such a key component to their design and everything in that commercial, how many people can really come in there, how big can this, how much advantage of that retail spot can we take based on, or do we have to make a big sea of asphalt kind of thing, you know?
We're planning on having that ready to present or let the council know in November.
Okay.
I think we have one meeting in November scheduled on the 18th or something, so that'll be the day
Okay.
that I'm planning on presenting it.
Well, it's like you almost know what we want. Good job.
That would be great.
Any other questions for Blake here? Do you have any further question on this item? Do you want to hear from the applicant, or generally we don't?
No. No, just, thanks, Blake, this is good work. I think this answers a lot of the questions that at least I know I had. And that clarification on the spreading out of the homes over the units means less units. I understand where a lot of that is coming from, so, thank you. This is good stuff.
Great, thank you.
The only question I have, and I'd like to have answered before we actually see this again, and probably would be a good thing for the council, or for the planning commission to know, is the average lot size, like where that, in those pods. So we want to be able to see, and John looks like he already knows that. So if he want,
I'm okay if he comes up.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and come
It's a
on?
question that we directly asked him.
I think it's helpful for us to be able to see the whole picture, so if, we can go ahead and have him come
And
up.
in your packet, you do have the proposed land use plan. It breaks down and shows you the density for each one of those areas, but I don't know how that lines up with the average lot.
Thanks. I know that you're trying to stay on an agenda, so I won't dive into it too much. I have a whole lot that I'd like to go in to try to propose and tell you all the thinking behind all this, but I'll save you that brain damage. I think you're going down the right path of what we're trying to do, build a better community up there. We're following our MDA based on what's allowed in our agreement for us to ask for as we progress and acquire property and so forth. To address the question specifically about the average lot size, we're happy to do that, and we always do that when we bring in a site plan as part of our, I believe it was our first amendment, where we generated a processing protocol that says, once we have our land use master plan with our zoning areas and pods, so we know what density and what zoning will be in certain areas, then we come in with a site plan where we actually lay it out. And the reason why we do that strategically that way is because we're always negotiating with our end user, which is the builders, on what they like, what the market asks for, what the community is asking for, things like that. So once we bring in site plans and show you certain areas, we always have our tabulation that will break out that average lot size for you.
And
We'd be
that's,
happy to do it
and
that
that's
way.
helpful. And I think the issue that comes up for us, and it's not necessarily you, we've dealt with a lot of builders over a long time, is that we get, we hear it before, you get promised a shiny car, and then it's not a shiny car. And so if one of the big, reasons that we're looking at this is, hey, the overall lot size, for a lot of these homes is going to increase, even because some of them are going to decrease, we just want to make sure that's what we're actually getting
Absolutely
down the road. And I'm not saying that we're not going to get that. I'm just saying that that's why we're having, personally, why I'm having those questions.
Absolutely. And to segue on that, just to give you kind of our background, you guys, we've built a relationship for quite a few years with our group and yours. And so when you look at this, the one thing that's missing in this analysis is what's already approved. What we're taking is 2008, when we had the MDA, and then what we're trying to do is take a snapshot now of what we're proposing, but what's not reflected in this is what's actually already approved in the current land use master plan. So if you look at areas where there's low density, we have a proposed area that actually increases the density to these multifamily townhome, right? When you go and look at what we already built and what's already approved and what we built, it's lower density than what we could have done. And we've always taken that approach that we're not going to build what we can to maximize our yield and return. We're going to go and build what's best for this community, what the product needs, what the community needs, and what the demands are. And so if you look at what we could have built in a lot of these areas, we could have built bigger densities,
Absolutely.
so.
And I think, I think I'm reading the council here correctly. I think we're all, thinking that this is well on its way to being a good plan. It's just
Yeah, we hope it
hammer
will.
out the details. So
Great.
thank you
Any
very
more
much. Appreciate it.
questions? I'm available.
John.
Thanks, John. I was just pulling your leg earlier, sorry.
All right, so we will move on to the next item, which is 2.3, as we have moved that forward. Discussion pertaining to the application submitted by Jude Messenger on behalf of Academy Village Land Holdings, LLC, and in partnership with John Lindsley, requesting the approval of a draft village mixed-use overlay zone to regulate signage within the commercial development that contains a minimum of 40 continuous acres of property. Michael.
Okay, thank you. And as a legislative item, this is a petition that has been forwarded by the Planning Commission to the City Council for your consideration. And of course, tonight is just on for discussion. John, are you just advancing these for me? Okay. So this is our standard timeline that the council has requested. As you can see tonight, we're discussing this October 14th. We've already conducted our public hearing with the Planning Commission. And then potentially this could be on for action in November.
Did you get any feedback from the public during your public hearing?
The public hearing that was held with the Planning Commission did not have any public comment.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
This is the vicinity map, and you can see that the area where this may be applied, again, we're just talking about a text amendment tonight, but if we approve this in the future, the applicant would like to come back and do a zoning overlay and apply it at this location that we have been talking about. Next slide. You can see a little bit closer between Academy Parkway and Mountain View Corridor. North is to the top of this map. Autumn Spring Drive also on the left, and Real Vista Drive bisects the property.
It definitely doesn't really look all that way out there.
Yeah, it's more separate. Next slide. This is just an exhibit just showing how their master plan is intending to locate these signs. This is just a concept. I know that the applicant has worked with various sign companies to try and develop a plan that they think reflects the theme and the architecture of the project, but again, this is just a concept. This would be resubmitted to the Planning Commission for an overall site plan review. But you can see the various monuments and directional signs. Down at the bottom of the screen are these freeway-oriented signs for Mountain View Corridor that are taller. And this is one of the main reasons why the request has been submitted to have an overlay that may allow for these taller signs. Next slide.
How tall is the,
So here's just an exhibit. It says 48.9 feet. The ordinance, the draft ordinance would allow up to 50 feet. Also, it specifies that it can't be more than 45 feet above the surface height of Mountain View Corridor. So whatever the asphalt height of that corridor is, they would have to be no taller than 45 feet. Next slide. And you can see this kind of relationship where we know there's a grade change between the level of the site and the corridor. You can see that by the time the sign is actually constructed, we're closer to about 35 or 36 feet above the corridor itself. For reference, I checked with Riverton City on what they allowed for Mountain View Village. They allowed in their MDA or their development agreement signs up to 50 feet in height. So this request is very consistent with what is already happening in the marketplace along Mountain View Corridor.
what did we allow on the sign for Zions Bank, Real Zions Bank Academy?
I don't
State,
recall.
whatever.
I did not double check that.
The
Taller?
zebra side. Okay,
Okay, so it is 50.
can we just confirm that?
Yeah, we can do that too.
Because obviously I don't want to go any higher than that at an absolute maximum.
Yeah, we included in the packet some other images. I won't go through those tonight. But next slide. Oh, this was one issue with the Planning Commission. Was noted we had a 5-1 vote. The one dissenting vote was just concerned about making sure that the text is large enough that it is visible and it doesn't become cluttered. Clearly, the intent of the applicant is to make sure that this is usable and readable text. I know that their sign consultant is very aware of design speed and making sure that this is effective at communicating, you know, who's here in the center and how do you approach these different businesses in the center. So that was the one concern. There was a suggestion that maybe, for example, this image right here has 10 different businesses that are being advertised. He was wondering, could we limit it to 6? But the rest of the commission did not support that, but that was the one concern that came out of the Planning Commission. Next slide. So again, this was a 5-1 recommendation. And essentially, we said we would work on the design and maybe address those concerns, make sure that the text and the legibility did match with the design speed and the needs of the center. And the applicant has communicated that they would be very sensitive to that as well. Any questions about the project?
Just a quick note, Michael, thank you so much for bringing the report from the Planning Commission, specifically about what the dissenting vote was and the reason. I think that information is very helpful. I think it gives color onto the discussion that they had. You know, you review the minutes and you kind of get an idea of what it was, but I appreciate that summary and refreshing our memory about what's going on there. My only question is just echoing what the mayor said about not exceeding the height of the zebra sign there. But I like the pictures that are presented so far, so thank you.
So again, we'll have this on a future agenda item for potential action.
Any other
Yeah,
discussion?
Mike, does the proposed text amendment, does it take into account those existing signages that are out there in proximity that something else can be built to those signs for the Real facility?
This would be restricted to just the area that the overlay would apply to, so it would govern everything within this particular area.
And back to your map that kind of shows potential positioning of these signs, I didn't see anything on there where it indicated where those other signs, I can't remember exactly where they are along there myself. Are they both further south and further No,
Yeah,
I'm
they're
talking,
not- they're
I'm
not
talking
part of this
the,
frontage.
I'm
Right,
talking
yeah.
the Zions Bank Real
Right.
Stadium signs.
And maybe what we can do is have another map in our next presentation. We'll show you where they are in relationship. We can have that for you.
Because what I don't want to do is, obviously, you know, we need signage to be able to advertise for the commercial that's in there, those types of things. But what I don't want to do is, because it is in close proximity to the Real Stadium there, is to make this stretch overly cluttered with signage. And again, taking into consideration some of the, you know, the light pollution that comes from those and those types of things. We were very cognizant of those issues when the two signs for the stadium went in. And the spacing was such, again, to allow that those were far enough apart. Obviously, to do their advertising, you know, some partnership with the city. But now we're looking at adding more in between those signs, if I remember correctly, on their positioning. And so my concern is how much are we getting right there along this section of Mountain View corridor?
Yeah, just another thing for reference. Again, I'm just looking at what's happening in the market and making sure that we are comparable, or at least, you know, we're kind of fitting in. The Mountain View Village, I believe, had up to 6 50-foot signs. And right now, we're only seeing a request for 2 in this proposal. So potentially, it seems like the request is reasonable. Yeah.
And I don't think any of us disagree that necessarily the request is unreasonable. If we're doing a text amendment, you know, we need to
Right.
make sure that we're consistent throughout time. One of the things I would like to see, to piggyback off of Clint here, is a minimum distance between signs.
Okay.
Like that, and not just in this space, but minimum distance between any signs over what's normally allowed by ordinance. So that would include the zebra signs. So I don't know what the right number is for that. I'm not the expert, but I would like to see a recommendation from staff about how far that minimum distance should be between those signs.
Okay, we'll take a look
And
at
I
that.
don't think that the applicant is looking to put them every 10 feet. Like, I don't think that's the issue. I just want to make sure that we're consistent so that when it gets applied to the next option, that's already in place.
Correct. Okay.
Any other comments or questions or concerns? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You.
All right, we will move on to item 2.2, discussion of a resolution adding fees related to small cell wireless facilities and public improvement district applications to the Harriman City fee schedule. City Attorney Chase Andresi.
Thank you, Mayor. In recent months, council has taken some action that requires an update to our master fee schedule. Those 2 actions specifically are the adoption of a master license agreement for small cell wireless facilities, and the second would be the adoption of a policy regarding applications for public infrastructure districts. So dealing with that first one, the small cell wireless facilities, part of that master license agreement, and again, part of the larger state statute with regard to wireless facilities, is that there are certain fees that can be charged. Those fees are largely dictated by statute, but they are adopted into our master license agreement. And so any applicant that comes in to install a wireless facility within the city limits would have to pay that. Specifically, those fees with regard to the application are $100 for each small cell wireless facility. There's a $250 fee to install a facility onto an existing pole that exists in the right-of-way in the city, and then a $1,000 fee for an application to install a wireless facility onto an existing utility pole that does not exist in the right-of-way. So those would be added to our fee schedule if approved. The reoccurring fees, again, as required by statute, or as allowed by statute rather, are $250, which is collected once each year for each small cell wireless facility installed in the right-of-way, and then $50 anytime a user comes in and installs a wireless facility onto an existing pole. Those fees under statute need not be paid, those recurring statutes, if a provider is exempt under state statute, and there are some specifics that apply there. Those specifics aren't included in this fee schedule application simply because they would just petition to waive that reoccurring fee if they fall under that exemption. So those are the fees for the small cell wireless facilities. The fees for the Public Infrastructure District application are much simpler. There are simply two. The first would be a $100 fee due at the time of submission for a submission of a letter of intent, and then a $1,000 fee when an applicant submits a governing document to the council for review. So again, those fees, if adopted, would go into our master fee schedule for the city and would be in effect going forward. Any questions on that?
The only question I had was just, how did you come up with those fees? Is this something kind of just what you'd see? Or
How do we determine that? Yeah.
exactly.
No, it's a great question. So again, with the small cell wireless facilities, that's very much determined by state statute.
Okay.
They actually put a cap on those fees. So the majority of these fees are just at the cap. And that's been best practice with largely all of the cities that have a master license agreement, is to adopt these fees at that rate. Usually, looking at fees more broadly, you would determine how much staff time is it going to take to review something of this nature at a specific dollar amount. We do the same thing with grammar requests, right? We say, how much time is it going to take to respond to this? This is our hourly rate. This is how much you're looking to spend. So we try to do that, and they can be adjusted up and down as we go forward if it's too low or too high.
Okay,
So
that was all I had.
Any further discussion? Okay, we will move on to item 2.4, discussion pertaining to an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County regarding a stormwater management outreach program. Jonathan?
All right, hello. Okay, so just quick background. As some of you might know, we've entered into an agreement with, well, let me back up. So we are currently permitted by the state and responsible to do certain items, right, as it pertains to proper stormwater management. And one of those items, there's some overlap with the county, and we've entered into an agreement with them to share cost responsibility of that effort for public involvement. Now, this was signed back in 2017, and again, this was just with regards to cost. Well, I shouldn't say just, but it skimmed over the top of the responsibilities of the task, but more so outlined the cost sharing. The state, at the state's request, asked the county to start an interlocal agreement to better outline the task responsibilities. And so that's what this agreement is, and so I thought I would just kind of go through that a little bit.
Can I ask you just some general questions before we get too far? First, there is some things referenced here, like the part 1.5. There's a bunch of part 4.2.1. I didn't have any reference to look those up to understand what our agreement and what we're really asked to do. But even more than that, it's more of just a philosophical question. Why do we want to, and how do I say this politically correct? I feel like it's always important for us as a city to maintain as much autonomy as possible, rather than having interlocals unless they're necessary. And sometimes they are helpful and necessary. And so my question is, can we just do this on our own? Do we need to use the county for this? Is it cheaper for us to do it on our own? Why would we do this versus just doing it ourselves?
And that's a good question. And for those of you, maybe a good example is the Stormwater Coalition with the county is the group that kind of works through this public involvement and outreach. And you might have seen it. We all live downstream. That is part of that program. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do is get credit for that. And to kind of piggyback off of those efforts, I would say I have not done a cost-benefit analysis on what it would take for us to completely, our staff to complete if we severed from that agreement. So I wouldn't be prepared to answer that right now, rather than to say that that effort that they've completed, piggybacking onto that, it seems to make sense at the time, perhaps in 2017. And we can, in this agreement, just for what it's worth, there is a termination clause. We just have to let them know within 30 days we want to pull apart from that.
I just always am interested in knowing that type of thing, because it's like, I don't know, does it make sense? Or would it cost us, $53,000 instead of $5,300 if we did it?
$5,300, yeah.
You know what I mean? If we did it ourselves, that kind of stuff, or maybe it would only cost us $3,300 if I did it ourselves. And then we have a great communications team decides our own information. You know, I mean, I just would be really interested in understanding if it's cheaper to go this way and if it's better to go this way.
That's a good question, Sherry. Maybe what we could do is step back, talk communications, see what that effort, understanding what it would take for them. You know, as you know, there's commercials that the county provides, and there's a lot of other items that are included. Maybe we see what would be required on our end to offset that. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I don't mind.
I'm just going to pause here and look at Tammy. She looks like she's wanted to jump in.
Yeah, for sure. And the difference is we just wouldn't get credit in our hours for that, right? Those things are going to keep going out. People are just going to keep hearing those and seeing those. So that part to me is like, it's somewhat of a moot point. The question is, does it impact us financially because we can't attach our name to that hours?
Certainly, and there's some work to be had to figure that out, I would say. So I would think that what we have currently, we have items that we use when we go to our town days, right? We sit down, we hand items out. That is from the coalition. We have pamphlets, items that are created for us that we essentially kind of put together with other cities and municipalities that are also under this same coalition.
So this is kind of our coalition fee, $5,300?
Say that again?
Is this $5,300 kind of our coalition fee then?
Yeah, kind of like membership
We would no
dues.
longer be part of that coalition unless we
Correct.
give them this money.
And I just want to say why David's pushed the pause button here. I really echo the questions that Sherry's asking. And I think those kind of questions in a broader sense are really relevant to a lot of the discussions that we have, is understanding, are there alternatives? What are those alternatives? And the fiscal part of it is just one part of evaluating the plus and minuses of an alternative, but it at least should be something that's part of the discussion so we at least understand what the financial impact of A versus B might be. So for just what it's worth, I would like to see those kind of, that kind of information put in with these presentations and they come up to say, we've looked at if we did it on our own, here's some of the pros and cons, here's the cost as part of pros and cons, but that's very meaningful input from staff to help us make better decisions.
Certainly.
Yeah, I just look at the different things that we've had to, as your city grows, things change, you know what I mean? And think different things that maybe made sense in the past don't make sense anymore, and we have to make those decisions. So anyway, I don't mean to just dump more work on you, but it's really important for us. If we're going to enter into an agreement with somebody, it's good to know that that's the best, not only fiscally, but gosh, maybe our communications team is pretty good. You know, maybe they have a cooler message or cooler slogan. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that
Sure.
it's worth exploring to me.
Yeah, no, and again, this agreement we've been in since 2017, right? And so it's a matter of, maybe I was being a little too cavalier, jumping out assuming, hey, we're still on board with this agreement. So I'll step back, we'll take a look at that. Again, the termination clause is 30 days only, so there's
That's
obviously
good. That's awesome.
ability for us to jump out of that.
But if I can interpret that right, Sherry said she's willing to pay more than $5,300 if the slogan is cooler. So, okay.
Not what I meant.
Everything's on Jonathan. Any other discussion on this item? Thank you.
Did you get through everything you wanted to?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I really interrupted.
We didn't even get to the actual presentation.
Council, do you want me to do my presentation?
Please.
Please go ahead.
Please.
I actually, so I could sum it up with just this, honestly, is, again, so we have outlined the tasks, or excuse me, we have outlined the cost share already, and we've executed that in 2017. Now, we're just simply identifying the responsibility that we've been doing since that time. So I'll just sum that up really quick.
For sure.
So the county's responsibilities are, if you can go 2 slides, Jonathan, for me. So the county will provide these services. There's a lot of paperwork that's part of it as well that they were going to do for us as long as we provide that information. You can go to the next slide. And in the end, we are just essentially required to then provide that information and then continue to provide those dues every year. So that's
But are we kind of doing the paperwork and they're just plugging our paperwork into their paperwork?
correct. So yeah, so there's a concerted amount of effort that they would have to provide, but we just essentially give them what our portion needs to
Sure.
provide.
Thank you. And I apologize I didn't mean to interrupt your flow of your presentation.
No,
I was
no,
just-
you're good.
We-
Those are good questions.
We went way off on a tangent on that one, and I thought we were done, and I apologize for skipping through your entire presentation. Is there anything else in your presentation you want to share with us? Because it looks very pretty.
Thank you. No, that's it. Thank
The
you.
graphic design is amazing.
I'm really sorry we made you wear a tie. When you're doing it on Zoom, you don't have to wear a tie, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, yeah.
You
It's
can- you
been
can
been
just
tight all
wear
day.
jammy pants on Zoom.
Thank you.
Any more questions on this item now that he's actually shown us the slides? All right. We will move on to 2.5, discussion for pertaining to bonding options for water infrastructure. Alan?
I don't have anything new on this issue, but last meeting when we talked, you guys wanted to review it and ask additional questions, so we brought it to the agenda to see if there are questions and to get direction in which way we want to go. You know, we could do nothing, we could refund the 2 bonds that make sense, or we can do it all and do some additional funding for water projects, so.
Does this, just so that I remember correctly, when we're looking at bonding overall, this is considered separate from any other bonding we do, correct?
Yeah, the water fund and our storm drain fund are actually set up to live strictly off of their user fees. And, you know, all of our other funds, we can actually transfer money back and forth based on you guys setting a budget to allow for that to happen. We can't take money from the water fund for any other use. We can actually take general fund money and put it in the water fund if we want. But this bond, as we structure it the way we've proposed as a water revenue bond, the only collateral for the bond would be the water user fees. But this also does qualify for impact fees if we wanted to use impact fees on it.
But this wouldn't prevent us or make it more difficult for us to go out for like a general use bond or something else?
No.
Because they're separate, correct?
Well, first of all, I would never propose a general use bond because that's a property tax bond that actually creates a lien on every homeowner. It takes an election to go to. And primarily our main revenue source for general operating bonds is sales and franchise tax. So that.
And I wasn't suggesting that we had any
Okay.
desire to go to a
Yeah,
general, it was just an example.
No, it would be completely separate, and in fact, we get separate bond ratings for our governmental funds, separate from our enterprise funds. So we actually have a little bit higher bond rating with our water fund than we do with our governmental funds, but they're both very high. We're a AA plus with our governmental, and we're just a touch higher with that on our water bonds. But, you know, we even account for the 2 kinds of funds differently. All of our governmental funds are accounted for as fund accounting, which I could best describe as keeping track of it like you would a check register, where our enterprise funds, our water and stormwater, are more accounted for like a business because they are expected to carry their own weight. When you're looking at governmental funds, you don't expect the park to pay for itself or the roads to completely pay for itself. They're funded through taxes and whatever. But when you look at water fund, it's supposed to carry all of its own costs, so.
So I guess I would have the same type of question that I just threw at Jonathan. Is there other options? And what are they and what does that do to us?
I would think that, well, first of all, Justin has explored with developers of prepaying the cost of the water system. That doesn't seem to be a good option at this point. We've just recently gotten 12 million bucks from combination of Wasatch South and Rosecrest to put the last water tank in. So, he's explored that issue. You could levy a tax for water fees, but that doesn't seem like a really good option either. Or you can wait for it. And I would estimate, and I've looked at this, if you wait and accumulate the money and you do no other projects, you could probably have the money for this in 6 or 7 years. If you continue to do your regular projects that Justin's got on his schedule, you're probably 15 years out to do this.
And that's at net present value, or is that at future value?
No, that's based on what we're doing right now, so.
And when you say to do this, are you talking about the major one or can we do some of the smaller ones?
Well, first of all, the main piece of this whole thing is a $14.5 million water tank.
The east one, right?
Right.
Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
So, yeah, you could do the smaller ones, but you wouldn't want to bond for those to begin with.
Right.
It's too expensive. We're going to spend between $250,000 and $300,000 to do a bond. And I don't care if it's a $5 million bond or a $30 million bond. That's about what you'll spend. Okay?
Yeah, I think they said 384 or something like
Yeah.
that.
The refund is enough to cover that.
Well, the refund will cover, we can do that. So, when I look at it, we're not generating enough money to accumulate the money to do this within the foreseeable future. We've looked at several options here. I actually proposed this bond to the group that looked at it just because it seems like we're always coming from behind on these projects. We're always looking for a developer to fund it at whatever cost they do. We review it, but you do a reimbursement agreement and it's an engineer's review. It has no bidding on it or anything. And so from my point of view, we actually have a better situation where we go out and get the money and go through normal bidding processes to do these. The proposal that Zions has put together for us is 2.1%. As you know, the financial markets bounce around every day. We've seen recently bonds that go out for competitive bid at around 1.5 to 1.6. But contrary to what you would think in today's market, you'd think the bond market would be going down right now. It's actually going up a little bit. It's changing every day. Now, what we do with this is if we were to move forward with the bond, we start out with a parameters resolution that would say, we won't look at anything that exceeds this amount of interest. We won't exceed this amount of principal. And then we work towards the underwriting to see if we can fit within those parameters. Once we get to that point, then we look at whether or not the market will sustain what we're trying to do. So that's the way we go about it. Usually that process is 60 to 90 days, so you're going to see the market possibly up or down. Who knows what the election's going to do to it? We don't know.
Yeah, I actually had three questions I was going to ask of you, Alan, and you've actually already answered two of them for me, so,
Well,
so good
let
job.
me see if I can guess. No.
And the first one was, do we potentially have better control over costs by going through the bond process? And you clearly answered that because
I believe
of
so.
reimbursement agreements and things, much less control over
Yeah.
the reimbursement costs of those. So answered that one.
And just let me mention on that particular issue, one of the problems that makes this one difficult for reimbursement, even more than some of the others, is how many landowners are involved in
Right.
the service area. Where the last one, we had 2 landowners involved. I don't remember the number on this one, but it's quite a few, so.
Yeah. My second question was going to be next steps, and you covered that with the bond parameters resolution and some of the details involved in that. The third one, and this might be more appropriate for Justin to answer, is what are the city's obligations in terms of continued development and build of the water system to sustain some of the development there? You mentioned that to try and save the money, to have it in hand to go do it, is going to be several years. But where does that fall in line with the obligations we have as a city to continue to develop that system and allow it to support the development in the area?
Great question.
So as far as the obligations go, there are a couple projects on here that aren't necessarily pertinent to development. Some of the projects on here that we've listed are to try and help with our current situation to keep up with growing demands of our existing city. As far as the obligations go, the one water line that's on the north end of town that we've talked about to come in to feed Creek Ridge, I know that is tied to a master development agreement. I don't know all the details on that, but I do know it's tied to a development agreement.
Is that the 1.5751?
Yes.
North Herman, okay.
The priority number 2 is the East Harriman water system we talked about, a couple water tanks, pump station, and the respective pipelines. I do not know of any obligations that we have to do that. Now, obviously, we have a lot of developers that are anxious to get out and start developing, and without this water system, they're not able to. And that's the same with priority 2.5. Now, that priority 2 and 2.5, what I've listed, will also help our existing issues that we have. Thank you, Jonathan. Because the storage and the infrastructure that we'll place over there will bring additional source to our existing system as well. So those will help our current situation. The Juniper Canyon, the priority number 3, that is a project that's currently out and under construction. We are planning to fund it with impact fees, but with the low interest rate that we have, we were thinking about just tying that in there so we can keep some of those funds freed up in our enterprise fund and our impact fee funds. And then the last 2, the upgrade to the existing pump station, that is solely to help with our existing infrastructure issues we're having. And the same with priority number 5, that will help put additional source into that zone. So we have a couple that are tied to development, the rest are to try and help us out. That's what we're doing.
You've made me think of another question then, and you touched on it a little bit. So you mentioned tying some of these projects in that you were going to use impact fee force in order to fund. If you aren't, and I know it's very hard to say and predict forward, but if you have to use those funds without tying it into this bond, how may that potentially affect the other needs that you have moving forward and the ability to address them adequately if, again, you use the money out of impact fees now and not tie it into the bond?
So some of the things we're looking to do with some of our existing funds that we have that we're going to put into some of these others is to try and expand our secondary system and to try and help with deficiencies that we have in the system, like parts of Old Town. That comes out of the enterprise fund to upgrade those systems that have small lines and have deficiencies for fire flows. We're continually looking for funds to be able to do those projects, but we always have larger projects that just eat away at that. So it'd be nice to free up some of those funds to be able to do some of those projects to expand our secondary and replace some of our deficient water system.
I have a question. I'm not sure who, and it's probably an Alan question. If we go out and bond for this, is there a minimum or is there a maximum amount of time we can hold on to the funds before they're required to be used?
sorry. Once we get the funds, we have to spend at least 10% of them within the first 6 months.
But it doesn't have to necessarily be in this order.
No,
Okay.
no, the order it goes will depend on how you budget it.
Because what I'm seeing here is we have developers that need something from us, and we want something from those developers. And do I want to help our city grow? Absolutely. Is water an important, ability for them to grow? Absolutely. And we should be working together to make sure that we have the right densities and other things that go in those areas to support that water infrastructure. So I'm not necessarily opposed to going through for the bonds, with the understanding that that doesn't necessarily mean that we are prioritizing, for example, the East Harriman water infrastructure first, because we want to make sure that we're getting everything right there first before we put pipes in the ground. Does that make sense?
No, the priorities set forth are the ones that Water's Department sees as the priority, but it will come down to how you budget the money.
Because all of the ones that are our current infrastructure that we're trying to maintain or improve, I don't see any problem with getting those done right away. Why wouldn't we? But the ones that we don't have residents depending on and that we have developers depending on, they're wanting something from us. It's an opportunity for us to have those negotiations and make sure that we're planning appropriately as we move forward. And so my opinion in this is that I'm fine going out for the bond. I'm fine because it's going to sustain itself, with the understanding that that doesn't necessarily mean we have to put those pipes in the ground first to, and our hands aren't tied. We can negotiate as appropriate.
Which I understand exactly the point you're trying to make, only I keep looking at this page number 1 on Zion's report, and it haunts me to look at it all the time because column principal, 22,430,000, column interest, 10,463,000. So every day from the moment we get possession of that money, the interest timer starts ticking. So the sooner that they
It
get,
behooves us to pay it back as quick as possible.
that's the thing is that the sooner they get in the ground, then the sooner we can
And that's a
start
point well
addressing
taken.
them.
Thank you, Sherry.
That is true. However, one of the things that will happen with this bond money is once the bonds are sold and we have the funds, it will go into trust at Zion's Bank. Zion's Bank will invest it with the Public Treasurer's Investment Trust. Right now, the interest rate there, well, it fluctuates every month, but it's in the 1.2 to 1.7 range almost every month. So, you get this bond at 2%, there's not a lot of interest difference between what we'll earn and what we'll pay. But I always like to get it out there as quick as we can, because where this is tax exempt money, there are penalties if you don't use it quick enough. And so, it's called arbitrage, and we have to calculate the arbitrage and pay that deficiency if we don't do it. So it actually.
What is the minimum requirement? Is it 10% a year or 10?
No, it's 10% the first year, but then you're supposed to have it all spent within 3 years.
Within 3 years. But I think 3 years is more than enough time for us to work with developers and so that doesn't haunt me quite as much as, a year per se. But you make a great point, Sherry. That's very fair.
I understand both sides of it for sure, but
Just
I
one,
just know interest never sleeps.
yes.
I got a few questions about this too, related, so I'm going to pepper you with a whole bunch. So, and related to, Sherry, what you're saying, I still can't imagine that a 2%, 1.7 to 2.2, whatever kind of interest rate we might get here, that rate is somehow greater than the rate of inflation and costs of building the infrastructure by waiting 10 years, right?
Totally understand what you're
Especially
saying.
when there's an interest earned on the money that we're that we have in trust. So I don't know that the 10 million means it's a prohibitive number, but I do understand your question and appreciation there. So a couple things here. There's a point where it comes in where the interest rates get high enough or it wouldn't make any sense for us to refinance the 7.3 million or whatever it is, right? So would you still recommend if the rates were high enough that we couldn't refinance, would it still make sense for us to move forward with a lower bond amount for these projects without refinancing?
I think it would benefit us to move forward. You know, we are at 6.8 net present value on the refinance. Best practice.
That's a lot different.
Yeah, best practice is as long as that stays above 3%, you should consider a refinance. So we're a long ways above that. Now, part of the reason we've let it get to that point is because these two bonds are just to the point now that they can be refunded, okay? You'll remember, some of you will remember a few years ago, we refunded almost all of our water bonds. And we did that with what's called an advanced refunding, where in fact, we went out for bond, got the money, put it in trust, and it was 3 or 4 years before we could actually pay off the old bonds. But the money was in trust to pay them off when it became time. 2 years ago, that was taken out of the law and advanced refunding is no longer available. Or else these bonds may have hit that market a couple of years ago. But since the advanced refunding has been removed and we can't do that anymore, we've been watching these bonds to see when they became available, and they are available now to refund. So, yeah, if the rate got too high to make this not make sense to
North
refund.
of 3.75, something like that, right?
Yeah, and if it gets that high, the whole thing might be in question. You know, then it changes the whole complexity of what we're doing here.
Okay.
You know, but you know, it's been kind of funny that since 2015, we keep saying the rate's going to go up, the rate's going to go up.
Now they've gone down.
Well, we hit lower, you know. When we went out for bond in our 2015 sales and franchise bonds, the day we went out for those bonds, it was December 2015, it was the lowest rate that the bond markets had been in 100 years.
Well,
And, well, we've been a little lower than that this year. You know, we keep, the feds will move the rate up and then they'll move it down, or they hold steady, and, you know, and frankly, the last 5 years, the bond market has not done a whole lot of what you expect. You see it not reacting to the Fed very well. Right now, you see a lot of people looking to secure their money, and bonds are a lot more secure than some of the other things they're seeing. And so with some things out there that make it you think that the rate would be going up, it mostly has not been, but there have been days when it has. So, you know, we watch the rate and we see what happens.
So is staff looking for direction from the council?
Yeah, what do we want to
I'm
do?
sorry.
What would you like us to do?
Sorry.
Couple more questions.
Steve has a couple more
Okay.
questions.
So I kind of share Sherry's concern about the priorities listed versus obligations that we have versus prudent planning versus our ability to repay. I mean, we could go borrow 100 million, but we may not be able to repay that, right?
Right.
So a couple questions. First of all, the repayment for this bond comes from the water service fee revenue. Is that correct?
Yep.
And what's our debt service coverage on this then?
We're at,
What proposed on the new?
we were at 6.8 times coverage. We're going to be somewhere around 4 or 4.25 when we do this.
My understanding, though, is based on what we said, Justin, there's a couple of these priorities, 4 and 5, would actually help produce additional revenue. Is that correct?
Wouldn't necessarily produce additional revenue. What it does is it helps with our current system because our demands are so high, it's difficult for us to keep up during peak demands. And so this will allow to put more source into those areas.
Okay, I misunderstood what you said. My apologies there.
I think it's just that it gives
System
better water
deficiencies.
pressure.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I just want to make sure that, you know, based on what we're saying, we got 4 times debt coverage. My question then becomes more of a philosophical one here. With rates as low as they are, I mean, historically low rates, does it behoove us to potentially go for a larger sum of money if there are other projects that would make sense? At the same time, you know, there's the question of, are there things that we should be pushing off for a while that maybe don't make sense? And again, these are philosophical questions that we you know, there's a lot of ifs and maybes and, you know, considerations to make, but, you know, with a set of reasonable assumptions, I think we could decide whether or not this should be more or less, or if this is the, you know, the sweet spot. So I guess I would just ask, has it been considered whether or not there are other priorities or water projects that getting money at this low rate would benefit us?
I'll have to defer somewhat to Justin on that because I'm calculating based off the priorities he gave me. You know, he can address that. I just would like to point out one thing here, and it's one of the problems with the way we finance government is that
Bless you.
all of these projects are anticipated in our water user fee. And we're going to accumulate money over a long period of time, or we're going to finance it, one or the other.
Right.
You know, that's the way it's structured in our fee structure. And so, and whether it's impact fees or it's user fees, you always need the improvement before you get the money. And so, you know, that's a challenge. But as far as whether or not these are all the priorities we ought to look at, I'll defer that to Justin.
I'll ask one more question too that Justin maybe can answer too on this is does part of this anticipate the growth there? And what happens if there's a strong downturn in the market and the growth doesn't come and we're still obligated to bond, but the new users aren't hooking onto the water?
Well, I'm looking at it based on what we're doing now, but still, if you do not have the water fees to pay this, they have no claim on anything else.
Okay, good. But does it put our water department in a real problem?
Well, it could, if obviously if our revenues decrease, then we have to be able to make sure we're paying these bonds, and that's where the coverage ratio comes in, and obviously we're fairly safe with what we're doing and even proposing now. It's staying with, like Alan said, a 4.25 coverage ratio. But to address your question, Steve, there are many other projects that we could do. These projects that we've kind of proposed are priorities because of, you know, development, and then also to help with our existing, you know, deficiencies. There are many other projects we could do, and I have a list of probably 5 or 6 others that I would like to do, but this is just something that was kind of imminent, and so that's why we're looking at these projects.
I guess I'm just opening up the possibility, mainly because of the really low interest rates. That's the thing that's the most attractive is there's a marginal cost of interest for us to do these projects now, and I'm a believer that if we can do them now, it's going to save us money and the inflationary cost of those things over time, right? I know you have a wish list, right? And so I guess I'm opening the opportunity to say, well, tell us what your wish list is. Tell us what the projects that you'd like to see or the things you would be coming back and asking us for in 24 months or 36 months, and maybe it would be prudent to put it in this bond now.
Okay.
I would just hate to miss up a chance to get
Cheap money.
cheap money and do it, you know, for $25 or $30 million instead of $45 or $50 million in 10 years or 15 years, you know?
Yeah.
And upgrading systems now and taking care of our infrastructure now, we know that pays off in the long run. It's the same way with the roads. I mean, you know, putting down the chip and seal and sealing every year is, what, 12 times more cost effective than replacing the road? I mean, it is that much more effective. And why would we wait until, if we are in such a good prime situation where rates are low, we weren't affected by the pandemic in the way that other cities have been. We are so lucky to have such a great team that has really been in a, you know, conserve, pay attention, be careful. we have a golden opportunity to take advantage of really doing something right by our residents, which they're never even going to notice, but we know is right for them. I'm right with Steve. Let's start looking at what can we realistically get done. I mean, and I don't want to go down to a one-time ratio. Like I'm, 3 is great, but I'm not looking to do a one-time. But if we can get it to a point where we can realistically save our residents money long-term by doing those improvements now, particularly in infrastructure needs that we're going to have to deal with eventually anyways. Development, that's a whole different discussion for me. We got to get it done, but I'm not in a rush to make that happen. But these other infrastructure things that we need to do, reservoirs, those kind of things.
And it's one of the things that and again, sorry, Justin, to take this into a more, philosophical discussion about, proper governance here, but one of the things that keeps being mentioned by our residents when they're concerned about development and growth is the growth is coming before the infrastructure. The infrastructure isn't preceding the growth. And I think there's an opportunity for us to actually get ahead of this. Like Alan said, we're always coming at it from behind, trying to catch up. There's a chance for us to get ahead of these needs. I think it's something that we have to do right now is take a look at whether or not it would behoove us to add a couple of extra projects in this and maybe check off some of those things now.
Okay.
Because we know you're really upset to hear that we're going to give you more money.
We're going to think about giving them more. Let's be clear.
We're going to think about.
I want to hear a really good proposal from you.
Yep, you got
And
it.
I'm supportive, obviously, of looking at, great points made that, while interest rates are historically low, is it the right time to look at doing more? And I'm certainly in favor of considering those. That being said, I don't want to delay our process of moving this process forward. So at least from me, my recommendation would be to prepare that bond parameters resolution and allow us to begin that process.
We could potentially have Justin look at his priorities and see what else he thinks ought to be in there. We could come back with a couple of different parameters resolutions, one at the level we're talking, one at the one he's might come up with, and we can give you options that way.
It's a great idea.
Think Goldilocks, too hot, too cold, right in the middle.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see.
I really wish that we had this good of option to build roads and parks and
Right.
everything else. But the water system and way it's structured gives us opportunities that we just don't have in the other areas of our government. So,
Let's do this one right if we can,
okay.
How many times we heard from our residents, water, 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 where are we getting our water? I mean, we've all heard it, so. I mean, that's a whole bigger discussion on
Well,
where it's
putting the
coming
pipes in the ground is one thing, filling them is a
from.
whole
Is a whole
other.
different, is a whole different question. Any other further questions, comments,
Thank you, guys.
concerns? Okay, thank you very much. I believe that brings us to the end of our work meeting, unless there are any additional items that staff needs to address, but I don't see any on the anything on the agenda that would allow that. So I will accept a motion to adjourn our work meeting.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question before we do adjourn. I know I had mentioned earlier, and I don't know if it's more appropriate to do it under, in the regular meeting, under our committee reports, again, talking about CARES Act funding. But it may be, since we have a few minutes, it may be a good time for us to bring that up here, have a little bit of a discussion with Tammy involved in that, if the council feels that that's appropriate, and save us a little bit of that, taking up additional time in the work meeting on discussion of something that I do think is still appropriate under just our work session.
I'm on board with that. However, I'm going to look to our recorder and to our attorney to see if we have noticed properly to be able to have that discussion in this.
I think it's something that could very easily generally fall under what normally would be our city manager updates as we talk about that, which is normally when that would come anyways.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, we didn't notice that
notice.
today. That's my concern. Are we good? I'm going to look to our staff on that, or to our recorder on that one. If she gives me the nod, I'm good with it. It's just, as far as noticing, are we covered?
Like I say, just look to take advantage of time, but it's up to.
Well, I mean, it could be part of this evening's agenda, because I do believe our public hearing, our budget amendment, is related to the CARES Act funding.
So that might be
you
a better
agree with
time to
that?
have that.
That's true.
So that's when we will plan on having that during the budget
Or
amendment
should we push
portion.
that discussion to when we're having that budget amendment discussion?
So we could talk about it now? Are you good with it?
But is it 7 o'clock? Isn't our meeting start
Yes,
at
7 o'clock is when our meeting starts.
Oh, my apologies. I was still under the 7:30 assumption.
It's okay.
I know.
Doesn't matter.
Okay,
The budget.
awesome. We will
Okay.
talk about it during the budget.
With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn our city council meeting. Work meeting, sorry.
meeting.
I'll second.
See, I tried.
You tried it. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned from the work meeting.
I
We're gonna
definitely
take
agree it
a
needs
very,
talked
very
about,
short,
so it's good
like,
that
3-minute
there's a
break,
parameter to talk
and then we will
about it.
begin our general meeting.
Sorry, I had it in my head that we were still on the 7:30.
You're good.
I did the same thing. I was like, wait, huh? All right, we will get started here on the general meeting. I will call our general meeting of the Harriman City Council to order for Wednesday, October 14th, 2020. We will begin with a pledge of allegiance that will be offered by Jonathan.
All right, please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jonathan, we appreciate your participation in our meeting. Thank you very much. Item 4.2, City Council comments and recognitions.
I'd just like to Harriman City is served by an amazing team. And without getting too silly here, I just want to thank people in this room, people that aren't in this room, that are working as employees of the City of Harriman for their just amazing work. They've had a lot put on their shoulders. There's a big absence created and some big shoes to fill and some responsibilities that need to be taken over. And our staff has done admirably, even commendably. I appreciate the diligence, the long hours, the forgetting of what day it is. I just want you to all to understand that we appreciate the long hours you put in, that it's not going unrecognized and unappreciated. So for lack of a more eloquence, I just want to say thank you.
You know,
Agreed. Okay, we will move on to item 5, which is our public comment section of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the City Council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the City Council may submit a comment for this meeting or future meetings by emailing the recorder recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agenda and minutes, where there will be a link to join the electronic meeting to submit your comments. Your statement will be read into the public record. I will now open the public comment for those here. I do not see anybody from the public in the room in attendance, so I will turn to our recorder.
yeah.
I'd like to turn the time over to Deborah Goodtrell. She is participating electronically.
Okay, Deborah, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. So it's Gatrell, like a Gatrell trail, it's the long A. I just wanted to introduce myself to you because I am a candidate for County Council District 2, which includes a significant portion of Harriman. I've spoken with several of you over the phone, but for those of you I haven't had the privilege of making my introduction, I just wanted to take some time to do that tonight. So in terms of resume, I am a member of the National Guard. I've got 21 years of service. I've been a Black Hawk pilot for 15. I've been deployed. So I've put my money where my mouth is in terms of, standing up for what's right. I'm also a teacher up in Granite School District. So I live at the north end of the valley in West Valley. But Camp Williams is down in Utah County at the south end. So I drive Mountain View Corridor on a pretty regular basis. I've been watching the growth happen on the west side of the valley, well, for 15 years from the air. It's really been quite a remarkable transformation. So I recognize the changes that have happened and the changes that are coming. At school, I teach geography, and with my military intelligence background and that course, I paid close attention to the international news, and I recognized this spring fairly early that the pandemic was going to get really bad and it was going to affect us here. I told the kids we'd probably end up shut down and doing distance learning. These things have happened. I knew that this would have a serious impact on our economy, which it has. And this really does require a whole of government response from the federal level down to the local. If we can't get it right, then we're potentially staring down another Great Depression, which would just be horrendous. So in looking at those things, I recognize that with my historical perspective and my military training and experience, I really bring a unique skill set to the table. And local government is where I can use that to make the biggest difference, to help us not just get through things, but come out better on the other side, because so many folks got left behind with the last recovery. So there's a lot that we need to do. There's a lot that we need to address. Looking at the issues on the west side, of course, we've got most of the undeveloped land. I'm very sensitive to what development should look like. And there's a lot of things that have to be done in the right order with sequencing and timing. So I look forward to developing a good working relationship with your city and with your city council, and addressing your needs and concerns, representing all communities on the west side, not just the north end where I live, and making sure that we're representative effectively and that our needs are met, because they haven't been met as well as they should. And I
Thank
can
you,
say
Deborah.
that for people, and that's right. So thank you so much for hearing me tonight.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to reach out to us and look forward to seeing how things work out on the election.
And thank you for your service, Deborah.
Any other public comment? Okay.
We received a comment by Chris Raymer. He has a concern. His concern is horse owners not cleaning up after their pet, as is required by other pet owners on heavily used multi-activity trails in surrounding mountains. It is disrespectful and can be dangerous to have horse piles left on the trails. He had suggested for the city for a requirement to have horses wear poo bags. Bikers and runners alike who frequent the trails far more than horseback do not deserve to step in or have dung fly up their backs and legs while riding. It also has a danger as downhill has speed, and if a turn a corner and there is a pile, natural reaction is to avoid, which could cause injury to a fall or slip. He wanted to get this into consideration to change in policy for horse use. He does not feel it is unreasonable to ask for this requirement to be added to the use policy for the trails.
Thank you for that comment. All right, any further public comments at this time? Awesome. We will move on to our next item, which is City Council Board and Committee reports.
I have the water report. We had our meetings yesterday and today. Just quickly, just some of the Harriman things. Well, district-wide, we're up about 19% on the water year this year as far as distributed water between wholesale and retail. And we're up actually 29% on the irrigation and raw water. So obviously it's been a very dry year, and those resources are being utilized heavily. Looks like Harriman itself is up from last year to this year, we're up 43% in Harriman. So we're definitely seeing a continual increase in water. We are definitely way over our contracted amount, but Justin and his team are doing a great job working with the district to address that and redo our contract and things like that, to make sure that our contract isn't too big and isn't too small, because we are obligated to purchase the water in our contract even if we don't use it. So that's important to get that right. I do want to publicly acknowledge Justin and his team. We have been discussing these ordinances as far as conservation ordinances and things like that for quite a while, and they have really been instrumental in working with the water district to create good conservation policy even at the district. So just kudos to their feedback, and the information they've been sharing has really been helpful in really creating those conservation guidelines. So thank you to them and for what they do for the district. Second thing, we have talked about this probably more in a work meeting, I think. I don't think it's ever been in the regular city council meeting, but there is some district-owned property off of Porter Rockwell and Mountain View in that corner, just east of the treatment plant. And we were looking into the possibility of creating a big athletic fields there, a big athletic park there. There's about 50 acres there. That's a monofill, but the problem is it's an active monofill. So I think going into it, the idea was that this is 50 acres that's just monofill, we're waiting for it, and we can just go in there and cover it and utilize the ground while things are degrading or things like that in the ground. But it's not the case. They have different cells. One of the cells is 7 acres, and that 7 acres is complete. But the next cell is like 3.4 acres, and it's not scheduled to be completed until 2022. And so the vast majority of that is things that they will continue to bring monofill into and continue to utilize. So it's just simply not a possibility to do that. We were possibly entertaining a kind of a public-private partnership to where maybe the city would be part of the lease, and then the private entities could do the construction of the fields and take that cost. But the district would only be interested in doing like a 20-year lease, and so it just doesn't make financial sense for anybody to come in and put in that kind of infrastructure to do, unless it's a massive, kind of regional kind of filling park. They did have another piece of property farther west that's about 18 acres that they were also, that's flat. It doesn't have the monofill issues with it and things like that they would be agreeable to doing that. But again, but only on a 20-year lease with the possibility of renewing it. But for people to put out the type of money that you'd have to put out to put in those playing fields and stuff like that, it just is not cost effective to do it. So it was a great idea. And again, thanks to Justin and Wendy and their team for working hard on that and getting those answers for us, because it would have been great if it would have worked, but it's just simply not financially feasible to that. So my direction to the district was that I don't feel like we wouldn't have the partnership to move forward on that. I don't think it's anybody's financial best interest, and overall it has to pencil. So I've asked them to, I appreciate all they did to bring that information to us and working with our team to get the information, but we'll probably not move forward on that at this time. And that's my report on that.
I'll just update quickly, mentioned it a little bit earlier, and then this will come up, I think, in our next item, which is the budget amendment, specifically as it relates to CARES Act funding. So I think everyone on the council is aware that there's been 2 disbursements from Salt Lake County to the city with CARES Act funds. And then, of course, there's parameters in how those funds can be spent and utilized. So the league board has been tasked with really looking at disbursement of remaining CARES Act funds that the state has received within the 27 counties, not including Salt Lake and Utah County, that has been dispersed from the legislature directly to those 2 counties themselves. So the league has been tasked with looking at the remaining funds and how that should be dispersed, again, outside of Salt Lake and Utah counties. And we had this discussion where we considered some options. It's about 4 or 5 different options that were on the table that the board all discussed last week. I passed those options on to Tammy and Wendy and staff here to get some input from them, and then we needed to report back to the league, to Cameron Deal, the league, as far as what we kind of thought was the best moving forward. There were some arguments, I shouldn't say arguments, there were some points made from some of the resort communities throughout the state, of those that have been maybe significantly more hit through this pandemic because of the loss of revenues as it relates directly to travel and tourism. And so there was a plea from those to consider some type of additional funding potentially for those resort cities. Essentially what we came up with of the options that were on the table was really kind of a combination of 3 of those options were on the table. And then what we really came up with was essentially option A, which was to do a disbursement to the other cities throughout the state with a 10% set aside, which equated to $3.5 million, that allowed for those resort cities to then basically submit an application for additional funding and to be able to obviously justify their needs as it relates to the losses that they've experienced through the reduction in travel and tourism. And option B was essentially the same thing, but with a 15% set aside equating to about $5.3 million. With that would come a hard deadline for those cities to potentially apply for those additional funds so that they could, if they were not utilized, then be opened back up for other cities with other uses. But at the end of the day, I think the majority of the board members that gave input back on this was, again, to go with option B, which allowed for that little bit a larger set aside for those harder impacted areas and cities of the state. Of course, the timeline is what really kind of comes into play for all of us, honestly, when it comes to expending the funds. Right now, I think Salt Lake County is requiring a report back from the communities, correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, of November 30th of what they have spent and how they plan to expend the rest, but the hard deadline to actually expend the funds is December 30th of this year.
Right, but anything that we do not have in our outline to spend by November 30th
Defaults back to the county, yes. Yes. So now kind of one of the caveats through this whole discussion is because the money was given directly to Salt Lake and Utah counties to be dispersed at the county level, talking about these options, so the cities received two allocations of money throughout, well, we have as well as every other city throughout Salt Lake County. This money that we've been talking about, the league, is basically a third disbursement across the rest of Utah. So we're in a position in Salt Lake County right now that the Salt Lake County has not indicated at this point that they are going to do a third allocation to the cities, but that they will reserve those funds for them to make that decision at the county level of how those are funded. That's for Salt Lake County. Utah County has already made a decision, and they have dispersed basically that money all equally out to all of the cities there. So one of the caveats that we talked about as we considered these options is, again, that if Salt Lake County does not do a third disbursement to each of the cities, we potentially in Salt Lake County, as far as the cities, could end up with a lower per capita, amount of CARES Act funding available to the city than really everywhere else in the state. So that could change the conversation of how these funds are distributed if, in fact, Salt Lake County does not make a decision to allocate more funds to the cities. So
when are they obligated to make that decision?
Tammy, do you know if they've for Salt Lake County? I don't recall an exact date from them on an obligation to allocate that, because again, I think the indication at this point is that there will not be a third for Salt Lake County cities. Alan?
I would say that they're not waiting until November 30th for us to report. We're reporting weekly. They're scheduling to spend whatever we don't spend. So I'm reporting to them every week.
Yeah, that's very fair. Yes, thank you. So there's a lot of moving parts, obviously, and there's a lot of discussion about, again, the parameters in which to spend the CARES funding, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the budget amendment side of things tonight. But I think it's important for each member of the council to recognize how the current disbursements are being handled across the state, the role that the league is playing in that, and trying to make sure that, there's a fair disbursement to all cities, but then again, we do recognize that there are some cities that are hit harder than others. We had Moab's mayor, Park City's mayor, and there was a third one that all, spoke. There are members of the league board and spoke as we met as a board to discuss this, and gave some of the particulars about how their particular areas have been impacted, and it's very sad. It's very sad in some of those areas. And again, I think at the end of the day, that's why really there was the decision to try and do this 15%, a little bit higher set aside to free up a little bit more money that's available to those communities that are been significantly impacted. So if you have any questions on that I can answer right now, certainly, more than willing to do so, or we can maybe talk about it just a little bit more as we get into the city's plans for the CARES Act funding, what the city's done so far, and what some of the plans are moving forward, and how that may tie into, again, potential needs for additional funding that we may have in the city. And one point of clarification, there is some very loose language in the act that talks about that money being able to be spent for salaries and wages for employees that have direct responsibility over, COVID response. Salt Lake County did they put out basically a presumption clause last week, was it, Tammy, I think? They put out a presumption clause that basically clarified the fact that communities can use that money for salaries and wages for those that are, directly involved in COVID response and mitigation. I think the challenge, as it sits.
Define.
The challenge as it sits for our city is how do we classify, how does the city classify those individuals that are directly responsible? And they've actually been tracking, I know they've been tracking the time all along for employees' work as they do things that are directly related to COVID response, whether it's doing sanitization in City Hall, whether it's the stuff that the police department is doing in terms of their own PPE sanitization and their own research and planning, whether it's screening people as they come in the building, all of that's being tracked. As it relates really to first responders, that's kind of where it opens up a little bit, but yet it is a little more gray too because of how you characterize that. And I can tell you that being part of the discussions, there are some cities who I think it's easily justified on the fire and EMS side of things, who are responding on these patients with potential COVID symptoms every day. To do that, probably a little more difficult on the law enforcement side. So you have some communities who are really looking at using a good chunk of the money that they've been allocated directly to their wages and salaries for the fire and EMS personnel. But I think that's going to be a little more challenging and difficult for us to do within the confines of Herman City as well. But things that we need to be at least cognizant of and be part of the discussion. So I know we'll talk about that on the budget side, but Tammy or Wendy, either of you have anything to add to that?
I'll let Tammy. She and Alan have really taken the lead on this.
I don't think I have anything necessarily to add to that so far, but I think as we go through the budget amendment, that in those discussions with the league, there are issues with cities that definitely have been hit harder and so take that into consideration when we allocate that money. And there are some cities that don't have the same population we have, but their numbers are more, so we want to support them. Have been very lucky that we were able to kind of get and take care of City Hall and the building and do everything that we can to keep our community safe, our staff safe. And so I think if additional money is offered, I think we have some could contribute to our community. Disconnect with society because they feel stuck in their homes and not able to interact with others because maybe they are more. I think that's something that we'll cover through the budget amendment discussions when we talk about what we've done with the money, what we're currently planning on doing with the money, and what we would do with any additional funding that we.
I think one other thing to mention is that as a result of the full conversation with the league board, Wayne Bradshaw with the league, who's the director of policy, I believe I got his title right, reached out to me to really have a discussion, and I asked to involve Tammy in that discussion, again, since she's been really focused on that from the city. But we had an opportunity just yesterday, Tammy and myself, to meet with Wayne and really talk specifically about the needs of our community, and really as it relates to one that has seen a little bit higher incident of transmission rates lately, and what additional challenges the city has seen as a result of that increased transmission rate within our community. So I think it was really appreciated the league reaching out to us specifically to be able to find out a little bit more specifics about our community and how it's being impacted. And Tammy did a great job of being able to share some of the thoughts and visions of how we can utilize that money moving forward. And I think it was certainly some ideas that probably had not been thought about, at their level before of how to utilize that. So some really good conversations with the league recently on that. So like I say, hopefully that'll give you a little bit of background as we go into that budget amendment discussion.
Very helpful, thank you. Because we always do.
Yep. That's enough for me.
Couple things. Got to go to an arts council meeting the other night. That was kind of fun. Well, Zoom arts council meeting. Boy, that's a fun group. Just a couple of things to report from that. The Miss Harriman pageant is scheduled for the 24th, Saturday the 24th at Harriman High School. But with the recent announcement from the governor yesterday, that's probably going to impact how they do that. One of the discussions was about having no audience, just the judges and the contestants. I don't know how many contestants they have, but there could be, I don't know how they're going to do this. So I gave them encouragement. I said, please just try and find a way to do it now. They said they could postpone it. I hope they don't. But just keep an eye out for that, because I think that's going to be, the logistics are going to be TBD here, so a little bit. The orchestra that normally does the Night of Lights has officially canceled that and all of their holiday events for the orchestra, which is lousy news, but probably appropriate under the circumstances.
But we are still working on a Night of Lights. So Night of Lights is not canceled.
Just the
orchestra.
Orchestra's participation in live. There we go. Yeah. And then if there's anybody in the city that sings bass, Harriman Harmonics is looking for a new singer.
Got a pretty low voice there.
I
Sounds pretty
don't want
baritone.
Emily to recruit me. She was giving me the eye in the meeting. So
All I had to do is turn off your camera and you wouldn't see her giving you the eye.
that's true, but I would feel it still. They've got a lot going on. There's house decorating contest that started today. Goes through the 29th, and then that'll be awarded on the 30th. So that's just a cool community event. I think that's going to be neat. There may be some fun visits on the night of the 30th, presenting some awards for that. So we'll see how that goes. And I may or may not have an outfit with ruby slippers. We're going to see how that works here. So just teasing. We'll see.
I sure hope you're not teasing it.
Oh, Emily said she's making an outfit. I'm not sure what this means, but we'll see what happens there. It's a fun group, fun discussion. So Association of Municipal Councils was yesterday, and we had a presentation from Alan Matheson, who's the executive director of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. Really interesting to hear their vision and see some of the things they're trying to accomplish and who they have involved. The board on that seems to be a very robust and experienced board. Just a couple things for public consumption is that there is a website called thepointutah.org, and they are currently conducting a survey, which I think is only good through Monday the 23rd, something like that. It's only a few more days, where they're looking for feedback on some land use ideas and a general plan for that area. Without getting too specific, I would just like to express that in this master plan framework that they're coming up with, they're using a lot of the same buzzwords that we hear over and over and over again. And I think that there are reasonable points to consider, but they're very lean on the details. We want forward focus, live, work, play, modern transportation and autonomous vehicles and airspace for drones flying people, flying cars, and all these kinds of things are really great. And I asked Alan in the meeting, how do we bridge that gap between this grand vision they're going to have and then the actual execution that comes as developers are buying pieces of land and executing certain things? How do we bridge that disconnect between the pictures and the vision and this kind of noble expectations here, and then this reality that's sometimes very different? That's going to be a project done over many years. There's going to be economic ebbs and flows. People will try and cut back or speed things up. The same things are going to be happening there that happen in our city, right? And so I think that one thing that he did answer that I think is different than maybe some other ones is that the land authority here that is going to be created is going to continue to be involved in overseeing each separate piece that's being developed, each parcel that's being sold off. They don't intend to do it in giant chunks to one developer, that kind of thing. So perhaps that might be a way to mitigate some of that disconnect that we see. The other thing is that the entire development is going to be primarily all multifamily homes. They don't want single-family homes in their utopian development. Now, because it's right against the major interstate and where it's located, there may be some reasons to support a lot more multifamily down there. But it's still interesting to see, we hear this discussion happening in some of our more liberal states and cities where they want to eliminate certain types of land use, especially around single-family homes. And it's just interesting to see that type of thinking being a part of development that's happening here in our own state. And so I just encourage people that have opinions about that and want to express their support or objection to those kind of plans to please go on the website, participate in the survey, and make your voices heard. Again, if we're not engaged and active and participating, then we don't really get to have a say in what happens. So outside of that, I don't have anything else to report.
Awesome, thank you. We will go ahead and move on to item 7.1, public hearing and consideration of an amendment to the 2020-2021 Harriman City budget. Alan Ray.
We've talked somewhat about this, but we got our first money for the CARES Act a while back, and we've spent some of it, but and we were okay, I think, to do that with the approvals that we got here and so forth, but felt like it was time that we came back for an official budget amendment so that we know that we're on the right track. We have so far gotten $2,651,000. And we've spent part of that at this point. And just, this money is, by our contract with Salt Lake County, supposed to be spent 60% to support local businesses and 40% for COVID remediation. And so there's been some things spent. One of the things that's interesting in looking at this is one of the things that they really like in the CARES Act is for us to do things that allow people to work from home, for customers to deal with this electronically. They're really involved in looking at creating that connection for people who can't go into the workplace to have a connection of remote access. So that's one area that's looked at. As as Councilman Smith said, the public safety issue is really a big issue. And because this was thrown together so fast, the rules are kind of squirrely. And public safety is one of those areas. We had someone from the Department of Treasury come out and meet with the Association of Counties and said, if you're public safety, it's assumed that you qualify. Then someone from the same office came out and met with the League of Cities and said, no, you have to justify what you did for COVID to qualify. The governor's office, who has been kind of keeping the rules straight for the state, originally said, no, you have to justify what the use is. Then they came out 3 days later and said, no, it's presumed if you're public safety. Their next statement was something like, talk to your city attorney and see what they're willing to defend.
So what you willing to defend there?
That's the wrong approach.
Then they came back and they said, no matter what we tell you, if you do it wrong, you're going to have to pay it back. So, okay, so we're being pretty careful. We're watching what we're doing. We've done some things already. With this money, we've gotten $2,651,000 so far. We are supposed to spend $1,590,000 of that to support our local businesses. Okay, we've spent some of that, not a great deal of it, but a part of it on our Shop Around program, and then we're supposed to spend 40% of it, $1,060,000, on remediation efforts. And there's been some of those here. You'll see in the cubicle areas, there's been glass added to separate the glass at the customer service, and some of the other areas has been changed so that there's no clear opening towards our people. It's an overlapping glass. There's been a number of things done in the process of this. But in doing all of that, I've been uncomfortable moving forward with these without actually getting a budget amendment that gives us authority to spend this money. So we're looking for an approval today. First of all, that would approve us receiving the money, which we already have, and it's sitting in our bank account, and then spending $1,060,000 for COVID control and remediation, and $1.59 million for support of our local businesses. And Tammy will have more on what she wants to spend the money on. She's got grand plans. And, you know, I look at what we've done already, and our Shop Around program is the model for everyone out there. It's an amazing program that not only helps our residents, but helps our businesses. It's kind of a win-win situation. So we're asking for that approval. And I'll turn time over to Tammy to talk to you about what she wants to do with it.
Okay, so as I noted, we notably get recognized because we continue to think outside the box in spending our CARES Act funds, because we're looking at ways where we can benefit a large variety of members of our community, not just focusing on one single group. So as Alan mentioned, we've taken a lot of means here just in regards to COVID remediation. So we have our sanitization efforts. We have the glass that's gone in at the front windows, the plexiglass that's gone up to divide each of the cubicle areas. We have PPE in all departments. Did this just go off? Am I talking too loud? Sorry. Don't usually get accused of being
Tammy,
too loud.
time's up.
My 2 minutes. So we also did a round of PPE baskets to all of our businesses. And we are now looking at doing another round of PPE baskets to all of our businesses, but then we also want to put PPE kits in all of our police vehicles so that when they do arrive on a call, if the household needs PPE, they can provide them with PPE. Plus, as they're driving around and just doing random patrolling, that it would just be nice if they run into people as they're chatting, they can just hand them PPE kits. And then, of course, additional Tyvek suits for our officers, because I believe Chief, and he's not in this room, but he is on the call, I believe he said that each officer has one right now. The detectives have more, but each officer has one, so if they use it, they don't have a backup. So we'll want to purchase additional Tyvek suits. And then, of course, outfitting the PD vehicles with plexiglass to separate the front seat and the back seat. And Chief, if I'm misrepresenting that, you can chime in at any time, but I'm pretty sure that that's one of the things that was discussed. You're fine. And then, of course, we still, we receive costs from UFA, and we've also received costs from Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling, and that's in regards to their equipment, their PPE, and of course, any COVID remediation efforts. And when they send us their costs, it's divided between all of the cities that they serve. So we will continue getting those through November 30th. So as I mentioned, we are putting together another round of PPE kits for our businesses. We're getting them in the police vehicles. We're also putting them in our snow fighters trucks, since snowplow season is coming up, and in parks, streets, and water vehicles so that they have them. We have had to add laptops and equipment to courts because court is now held electronically, and they didn't have all of the systems in place that they needed in order to be able to completely hold it virtually. So we've added some laptops, some microphones, just to assist in the efforts there. One thing that we do want to consider is, again, plexiglass dividers in the courtroom, because they don't have those currently, and if they are able to come back into the courtroom, they do want to make sure that we do have safety measures in place. We continue to sanitize all of the office spaces. You've seen the little hand sanitizer stations in the lobbies of each of the departments. Jackie and I have been talking about if we need to look into plexiglass dividers, because we do have in-house voting here at City Hall. So we will want to make sure that we take the efforts on that day to make sure that we have places marked for everybody to stand to keep their distance, and that we're, again, providing a safe environment for them when they come to vote. We are looking at the capability.
Sorry, Tammy, quick question on the
yeah.
voting machines.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if they've been tested for if sanitizing them would interrupt their function of any way, repeated sanitization of the voting machines? What I'm saying is, if 100 people are voting and after each time it's done, it has to be wiped with a disinfectant, is there any
That's part of the testing
reason
process.
to believe that those will not function properly?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah. We can probably
And her
talk with
knowledge
them
is
about that and how they plan on.
Jackie says, you know it's good.
The system in the building, I know that we have some issues on the main level. I think that we tend to feel those when we're having joint meetings in the community room. So we are trying to look into that and see if there's a way for us to kind of amp up that service so that when everybody is logged in, it's not causing so many issues with connectivity and sound. We also want to enhance the microphone system in both the council workroom and in here, because we do get regular complaints that when certain people talk, it's just really difficult to hear them. So we want to have a microphone system that's a little bit more sensitive. And in the workroom, we want to have them be retractable so that maybe while you're in the meeting, they come down a little bit further. And then at the end of the meeting, they can go back up so that they stay safe and don't get played with. Let's see. We're also looking into the cost of a ventilation system in the community room down there, so that we can have certain meetings and certain functions in there, and it would keep the air clean. That is a really big expense, and I know that Brian Weidmer has been looking into that, and I believe Alan has been working on that as well, just to determine what the exact cost of that would be, and if it is something that we would be able to cover with these funds. Also, we really would like to look at a third and final round of the City Shop Around program because it does benefit both the residents and the businesses.
They all love it.
But we would want that amount, especially with holidays coming up, and this would be the final round. We would like council to consider maybe $100 to $150 per household, because we do have 60% of those funds that need to go towards economic development.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to be clear, because in the packet, it says we've spent to date $400,000 on the remediation, and then $150,000 for the business support. So, and I remember you telling me, so that's why I was trying to flip back through my notes, but when we did those first two rounds, we only spent $150,000 on the first two rounds combined.
I thought the second one was I have almost 150 for the second one.
40-something is what you said.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one was around 70,
That's what
wasn't it?
I thought. So is there more? I just want to kind of understand how much we spent in those first two rounds, so we understand, if we do it, this will be about this much money.
We are getting about 30% return, being
Would we anticipate a higher return for $100 or $150 one?
We did get a higher
I would think we
return
would, right?
We did get a higher return on the $30.
And I think partly, though, is because I think that, quite frankly, I think a lot of people threw them out thinking it was junk mail the first round.
On the first time.
Yeah. And then I think on the second round, they were starting to look, oh, wait, let me look and watch. And so maybe by the third round, more people will be
And the
like,
word got out, I
watch
think,
for
on the
that.
second
Yeah,
one, too.
exactly. I have no idea how to prove that, but I kind of wonder if that isn't part of that.
And I think that we would want to do it in the same way that we did the second round, where we give it in increments of 10. So even if we gave them 100, they get to spend it at 10 different places or at one place, which gives them options. Obviously, grocery stores, Smith's and Walmart were our two highest, and that's nice to know that they're really putting it towards food and needs. But then at the same time, they tried businesses that they didn't even know were in Harriman, because those businesses were on the list and they went there. And a lot of the comments that we got on social media stated that, oh, I didn't even know they were here. We went there, we tried it. And then it was interesting to see how many used it to pay for their gymnastics classes or towards their dental bills. So I think this higher amount will really help, and I think it will even add to the variety of businesses that they're using it at.
Yeah,
$100
I love
towards your dental bill is better than $10 towards your
I
dental bill.
love it because it does exactly what it was intended to do, help local businesses, but it has such a broader effect than that because it helps people. It helps everyone. It's such a great win-win. I was curious too, I know a few of the places I tried to use mine at didn't accept them. Is it just because they didn't want to, or they were too late for the program, or how did that work?
Yeah, so we did have some businesses that just didn't participate, and some businesses, if they're a franchise, like we were worried that Smith's would not be able to participate because they have to kind of go through a process in order to get approvals. But they took it right to their corporate, and their corporate liked it so much that they actually went and talked to other cities about doing a program that was similar. So they were able to participate, and same with Walmart. But some businesses, it just didn't make it through their process because it's kind of like a coupon process for them, and they have to get those approved in their corporate offices. And then, of course, we had home-based businesses that participated, and that was nice too. We didn't want to exclude them. And so I know that we had some turned in from someone who makes quilts. So there was just a variety of things. We had a barber that does that out of his basement. He has a barber shop in his basement. And so it was nice for the outreach to be so big.
Yeah, so we reached out to everyone that we knew of. Here's the opportunity. And then if they could possibly, if they chose to participate, they participated. Thank you.
And this is all CARES Act funding, correct? So in my personal opinion, as much as we can do reasonably, if it's 100, if it's 150, I am absolutely supportive of that, as much as we can reasonably do and still meet those requirements.
with that question, maybe you'll remember, but back when this started, you approved this to come out of general fund. We then got the CARES fund money that has covered it, so
Yeah.
none of it has actually come out of general funds. So
And so, and that, yeah, that goes back to my point. Like, I'm very much, as much as we can reasonably do on this, Tammy, to help with, because you say it's December, let's be honest, covering somebody's grocery bill so they can cover Christmas is a big deal. And, you know, for those families that are, you know, have lost jobs or things like that, $100, you know, for 2 kids, you can really make a Christmas work for $100 when you might not have had that option in the past because you were desperate to get groceries. So in my opinion, 100, 150, as much as we can reasonably make that happen, still doing what we've done in the past where, you know, you spend $10, you know, or spend $20, or however we do it so that they're incentivized to do it as well. You know, I think that's been perfect, and I think that I'm absolutely supportive of trying to get as much of that money into our residents' hands as possible.
And will you help me understand the timeline on that too then? Because like if you did another round, do they have to have it, they don't have to have it spent by November 30th?
No.
We just have to show it's designated to be spent. We've sent all this stuff out.
Yep.
And then we just have to have an accounting of it to the county by December 31st. Is that correct?
we have 2 accountings for this. First of all, the county was given this money and they've shared it with us. We've got to account to them. We will also go through an audit with the federal government over how we spent it as well. So Tammy and I are watching how it's used pretty closely, and we hope we're not making any mistakes, but you know.
Yeah, I was just thinking more in lines of kind of what with the mayor's talking about Christmas stuff. It's like, would that carry over into when people are actually doing their Christmas shopping and things like that? But it does fit in that timeline, right? Okay.
And I really like the idea of Steve having more money to spend on all of our Christmas.
Yeah,
presents.
me too. Me too.
Yeah.
As much as I like my fellow council members, I mean, I'm not opposed to sitting behind plexiglass up here on the dais. I'm just saying. I mean, I would love to be closer to Steve, even if it was just plexiglass.
If we had it in between you, you might not have to wear masks.
We are 6 feet
And they're
apart,
portable. All the systems that we're looking at are portable, so they wouldn't be there all the time. They're just dividers that could be brought out. But
I just would love to have the opportunity to have the entire council sit at the dais every week, in all honesty. And so while I know it might feel a little tacky, I think that getting us all up here so that we can all participate and truly be one council is something worth looking at.
If we keep our masks on all the time, we can, can't we? Yeah.
yeah.
You can.
It's just the mask or 6 feet.
Or 6 feet.
So even right here, we could actually, my mask is below my nose, but I'm 6 feet away, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So then, in addition to that, some of the new ideas that we've thought about, and these are some that we actually talked about with the league, is obviously, so when the newsletter was going to print, I noticed that there was an article in it that stated that the senior center is now offering their classes for senior citizens online. And I thought, well, what if they don't have a means to get online or pay for their internet service? So those were some things that I wanted to see if council would consider as well, is what if we had a program where they can apply to receive a tablet or a Surface, and then we could also consider paying for internet service for 1 year. And it would just be, I think Alan calculated kind of just basic costs. It would be a basic cost, and it would be something that they would need to apply for. And it could be for some of our more compromised groups, such as senior citizens.
I love that, and it does fit within control and remediation guideline things. Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
Because they do have to be feeling such a disconnect. A lot of them are not leaving their homes at all. And if they don't have any means to communicate with the outside world, it can cause so many other issues. Sometimes that leads to failing health, some mental health issues. And so if we can offer a way for them to stay connected, and then we can also offer a service where we can have that already programmed, ready to go, so that they just have to click on the button to be able to attend that class at the senior center. And we can offer somewhat some basic IT support when we're able to be able to help them out. So.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, as we're talking about directly related salaries, why don't we go ahead and plan, if we do something, which I think is fantastic, why don't we go ahead and plan to have one of our IT people, part of their salary just for that program so that we can adjust that accordingly, because that absolutely makes sense and should be considered.
Yes, because anything that they do in regards to COVID remediation and these types of things would fall right underneath that.
Yeah, so just having it planned that we will help you, I think that's amazing, and I continue to be astonished by what you guys are doing.
Tammy, a quick question for you. I know that when it comes to online schooling for our kids, most of the schools obviously are trying to provide those means for the schools, but do we know, are those needs all being met in terms of that regard as well at the school level for those who either are forced into online learning because of, like one of our high schools here is currently, or because they chose online learning?
So that's actually on my list, is to see how they're at risk, or maybe those that can't afford any type of Surface or laptop to be able to attend electronically, what the school's needs are there, because they could also, those individuals could also apply. So we would include any at-risk group that really needs some assistance throughout this, and all they'd have to do is fill out an application so that we can just take it through that process. And then one last thing that we've been thinking of is when individuals are quarantined. If they have COVID and they don't, or they suspect that they have COVID and they don't want to quarantine at home and put family members at risk, especially if they live with elderly parents or someone with a compromised immune system, we thought maybe we could work with our local Airbnbs that probably aren't doing very well right now, and maybe if we could work with the RSL Academy if their dormitories aren't filled, and provide some sort of amount to go towards a quarantine period where that individual can just go and stay there for that time period, and then we would also pay to have it disinfected, and this would all be coming out of the CARES Act funds, so that it gives them an opportunity to quarantine and not continue to put their family members at risk, which could just increase the spread. So those are some of the ideas that we've had, and we just wanted to see if those are the types of things that council supports as we work to utilize the CARES Act funds to benefit all individuals in our community.
Yeah, I do. I love all the ideas, but I do also like and you guys are great about this, just keep us in the loop on it. You know what I mean? It's like, here's some more things, because we're authorizing the money to be spent, but it's nice to know that, here's the ideas, here's some of the things we're putting it towards. This is what we found out for sure.
Okay, thank you.
I personally have complete confidence in staff at this point, and if they have any additional ideas that they need to get in under, the wire to get approval from the county, I'm fully confident that those will be appropriate, and look forward to hearing what those are after the fact. But I would encourage them to be added to that list as not to miss an opportunity. I think that we're all confident in staff's ability to add those items as needed. So please don't hesitate to add an additional one just because you haven't talked to us about it. Just let us know after the fact.
We can always send you an email to let you know kind of what new idea we've come
Let's be
up
clear, these funds were specifically designated for economic recovery and assistance, right? I mean, this is exactly what these funds are supposed to be used for. And I think there's a lot of communities that got a big amount of money and didn't have any idea what to do with it. And again, it speaks to what I said earlier about the amazing staff that we have here and the amazing people that we have working in the city. These are really creative, just amazing ideas to use these funds in ways. I mean, that shop around program, it helps our families in the city. It helps our businesses in the city. It generates revenue for the city. I mean, you can't get a better economic recovery model than what we came up with.
Yeah, I love it.
And being able to do things like that, and now expanding this into ways to helping some of our at-risk populations, students, seniors. I mean, there is so much positive impact we can have on our community using money this way instead of so many of the other things we do with money. This is one of the most direct applications of assistance and support and help. And I'm just, for what it's worth, I'm so proud of all these ideas. I think they're fantastic.
I wouldn't come up with any of them.
Yeah, as Sherry said, I still would appreciate an accounting and a report of this is what we're doing, this is when we're doing this, how much we're spending, that kind of stuff. But for what it's worth, I spend it all.
Yeah, and more so even just so that we can help spread that word. Like if we know seniors in our community that have they're not listening to the city council meeting because they don't have any access to it. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's great for us to be able to say, hey, oh, we're going to do this. Okay, cool. These people, did you know we're doing this? Just so we can help just be
And we
engaged.
do want to send out a mailer to let them know that this will be available so that they can hurry in.
I have one suggestion, piggybacking off of the idea on the Kindles. I know that we have a very active group of ham radio operators in our community. I know that we had a few, or at least a while back, we had a few ham radios that we would loan out to residents and have them out that they could use. That might be another option in here as well, to connect some of these individuals that are homebound with not just our community, but with the community at large, maybe putting a few more of those together, re-pushing that out and saying, hey, you know, if this is something you're interested in, there's this great community that will talk to you over ham radio and teach you everything you need to know, so that you can participate and interact with other individuals, even if you're stuck at home. So that might be, as we're talking about some of these things, I think that would be, and then it only goes to reinforce you know, those assets in our community as well, having more people that know how to do that. So I think that would be maybe an opportunity that we could take advantage of as well.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, Ellen?
Just know the ideas are Tammy's, not mine.
So we need to have a public hearing on this particular item. Keep in mind that the same rules will apply as earlier during our public comment. With that, I will open the public hearing portion of this meeting to anyone in the audience. Seeing that we have nobody in the audience besides staff, I will turn to our recorder to see if we have anybody at public hearing electronically. Okay, seeing that we have none, I will accept a motion on the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. That public hearing is closed. I will, if there's no further discussion, I'm happy to accept a motion on the resolution on this item.
If I can just make one comment, it's been our practice when we have a public hearing on something to leave it open for a period of time. I think there's an abundance of reason for us to move forward. I can't imagine much public comment that would be speaking against our utilization of these funds in the proper way. And so that being said, I'm okay with us moving forward and having a vote on the budget resolution change without extending it for the additional time. I'd love to hear the rest of the council's input and thoughts on that.
It's such a time-sensitive issue.
That's the other issue,
too,
so we got to
because-
get it done.
And I think generally speaking, we have done that with budget amendments because there is usually time-sensitive nature in terms of getting the accounting of those funds within the budget and allow them to be expended appropriately, so.
So I just want to make sure we're all in
Absolutely.
support
I
agreement on that.
Yep.
Is that a motion then?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R36-2020, approving an amendment to the 2020-21 fiscal year budget.
I will second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That motion passes. Please go do good for our community.
Thanks for all your work, Tammy and Alan,
Yeah, it's good.
The
Don,
work that it's
staff,
gonna
everyone.
There's going to be a lot more work, and we appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on to 8.1, which is our consent agenda. I'll accept a motion.
I will motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I second.
A motion and a second. Steve?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. 9.1, discussion and consideration of an ordinance authorizing a text change proposed by Braden Rendlisbacher, thank you, of Scenic Development, requesting an amendment to the M1 manufacturing zone to add personal instruction services as a permitted use. Michael.
Good evening, and thank you again. We'll just, for those who may be watching and listening to this meeting tonight, although the council was briefed on this item 2 weeks ago, I'll go through this presentation again. Again, this is a text amendment in the M1 zone, and it would apply to all areas that are currently zoned M1. This is our process on this project. The applicant submitted their petition in July. As mentioned, we had a briefing on this with the City Council in September. That was, apologize, I'm getting ahead of myself, that followed a public hearing with the Planning Commission in September where they recommended 6-0 to approve the text amendment. And then, of course, tonight, the council has the opportunity to approve the recommendation, deny the application, modify it, or potentially table it if you would like staff to do some additional research on the item. But you do have a draft ordinance in your agenda for consideration tonight. As we discussed previously, the request from the applicant was to introduce personal instruction service as a permitted use in the M1 manufacturing zone. For reference, we included in your packet all of the different land uses that are currently permitted or conditional in the M1 zone. And these are some that are similar in impact and the type of users or clientele that would come to a personal instruction service. We currently have both indoor and outdoor recreation facilities in an M1 zone as conditional uses, and a charter school is a permitted use. If this were to be approved, the applicant would intend to apply it to this particular project here in the city, the Rockwell Landing Business Park. And in fact, in the center of this image, you can see DBAT, which is classified as an indoor recreational facility. The particular application for this request, which would be processed by staff administratively or potentially with the Planning Commission if it was a conditional use, is for a dance instruction facility in this center. Now, the M1 zone is restricted to the southern edge, the southern peninsula of the city, along Camp Williams Road. And the Planning Commission, when they reviewed this, instead of forwarding a recommendation that it be approved as a permitted use, it was their recommendation that it would be a conditional use. And then they also specified a couple of essentially additional standards or conditions subject to a site plan review to ensure adequate traffic flow and sufficient off-street parking. The applicant requested permitted use, and so that's how it was advertised at the public hearing. That's how it was listed on your agenda as a permitted use. That's the request. But again, the Planning Commission had recommended as a conditional use. Now, as a conditional use, what that means is the applicant would have to bring a specific land use back to the Planning Commission. And if these standards were applied, we would, in addition to any of the conditional use standards that are currently in our code, we would also make sure that we address access and off-street parking. Now, we already do that, but really this is just reinforcing that these are very specific elements that we want to make sure we're reviewing as part of that conditional use process. So it's kind of that belt and suspenders type approach. So again, the Planning Commission did recommend this 6-0 as a conditional use with these standards. There was a comment, I think, from Councilmember Shields, who was asking about whether or not we could entertain a potential, maybe some separation requirements. I did a little research on that, and typically those additional separation requirements are applied to those uses that are specifically protected classes, such as maybe a church or even certain residential uses. Group homes might be specifically protected by law. Other regulated uses that have a known detrimental potential impact may also have additional requirements or separation. For example, maybe there's, we have a limit on how many check cashing businesses we have in the city. There's a ratio. Some cities will do that for maybe a tow truck and impound yard. But it does, in my research, I didn't feel like I could justify any type of separation requirement for personal instruction, especially where the commission's recommendation is to make it a conditional use. So ideally, we're already looking at all of those potential negative mitigating impacts and addressing those through the conditional use standards.
Unless there's no tenant next to them.
True. Anyway, so that, I did look at that, in response to your comments. But that's the recommendation from the Planning Commission. And again, council does have the ability to make further modifications to the text amendment.
I have two questions. Is it redundant to add subject to site plan review to ensure adequate traffic flow and sufficient off-street parking? If you already do that, is that necessary?
No, but like I said, it does draw specific focus on that issue, making sure we do address it.
But to do a
Maybe it
thorough,
elevates it.
okay. But to do a thorough evaluation of it, you check it anyway,
So there is a standard that we would go through, yes.
which includes those things?
Yeah.
Okay, and I understand why they put that there. I understand the reason behind that. That's my question.
So my big concern about this has been my daughters have both taken dance classes at certain times, and especially this time of year through the spring when it gets darker and it's darker sooner, those evening classes are attended by very energetic young girls running in and out of the building to stay warm and just because they're enthusiastic about their participation. And sometimes they're enthusiastic to leave the participation. It's just a lot of chaos, a lot of young ladies running in and out. It's dark. And so this traffic flow, off-street parking, I don't want to make this more complicated, but there's a real issue for the safety of the people coming in and out of these facilities at the transition times between classes. And part of the reason my question about the separation was, I wouldn't want busy things next to each other. I wouldn't want all these young girls being exposed, sorry, it could be young boys too, young people being exposed to something that's less safe or less savory to them. And if we put them in first and we don't know who the tenant is next and there's no caveat that would cause a separation or something, we might have our hands bound in permitting something there that would be a negative impact to the young people participating in this dance studio. And that's, I just need to articulate that concern. I don't know how to solve that, but it's a legitimate concern about the safety here and the potential addition of a new light manufacturing entity next door that could create a safety issue.
So is your concern that there's going to be steel manufacturing next to a dance studio? Or is it?
Yeah, well, that's an extreme example, but, I was thinking more of like, a tannery or something, no, I'm just kidding.
Deer hide?
Right. No, just something that would have any, I don't know, I can't even think of a specific example other than, it's one of those things where I would know I wouldn't want those two things together if I saw it. But it's hard for me to define it in advance.
I think that there's a couple of things to keep in mind, though, that would offer additional layers of protection, and that is that we have a building code, obviously, that factors in, and if a different type of business that has, say, hazardous chemicals next to it and those types of things come in, through that process, the building code will require them to put in depending on the occupancy type of that business, that now it requires potentially different separation in terms of the wall separation between one business and the other. And so I think we have some things in place. I definitely understand your concern. I think one of the things that's kind of been highlighted here is that there is some inadequacy in terms of what's currently allowed because it's considered a indoor recreation, which is really instructional services for sports.
Especially if it, like the baseball facility.
Yeah.
they're doing
Exactly.
certain- Or if it was a bowling alley, you could have lessons, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's,
Yep.
that's already happening in
Yeah.
some of these ideas.
And having been a parent that has, taken and picked up at dance studios more than any single person should in their entire lifetime, I think one of the advantages that I have found, because the studios, that my kids have went to are adjacent to other businesses, and I think one of the benefits is that generally they operate in different hours. There's usually a little bit of overlap.
I would agree.
But they generally operate in different hours. And, there's always the risk that there's another business there that doesn't. But at least my experience has been that they generally do to help reduce some of that concern. Because you're right. I mean, once that class gets out, it's ants all over the parking lot.
Yeah, and most of these dance studios are like 4 to 10, 3 to 10 kind of things where
After
it's,
school.
after school
After
and
school,
it's just
yeah.
packing them in, right?
Yep.
And same with like a karate studio or those kind of things where most of the students are coming after school hours and through the later evening there. Again, I don't necessarily have an alternative. I don't have a proposal to say I'd like, this is how I would like to see it. But I have a safety concern, and I almost want to add to this, subject to site plan review, ensure adequate traffic flow, sufficient off-street parking, and, safe pickup and drop-off of people participating in the instruction.
So I'd like to chime in on this one. I think less is more in this situation.
I understand.
I think that conditional handles that. I mean, if it has to go before the planning commission, because if we say in this situation, what I see happening is if we say this or whatever we say, all they're going to focus on is these items that's on this list, and they won't focus on things like lighting or a proper sidewalk distance or all of those other things that are all important. There's no possible way that we can actually list everything. So let's let it's my opinion that we just let the planning commission do their job. Second point, I think there's going to be a lot of self-selection on this. I don't think that a dance studio is going to intentionally put themselves next to a manufacturing facility that's not compatible, or stay next to a manufacturing that's not compatible.
It's not the dance studio's selection that I'm worried about. It's after they're there, somebody coming in next to them. That's really where
I think they'll self-select on that. And at what point do we regulate what business can do what? And if we're going to allow it in a zone, our job, my opinion, is that in order for us to control that, we do that through zoning, right? And so if we don't want it, then if we think it's that incompatible, then we don't allow it in the zone.
Well, and to be clear, there was a discussion about the creation of a different zone to handle this type of thing, and maybe further delineating. I don't know what we would call it, but I don't know what you used it, but it could be like an M2 zone or something that would be cover this a little differently. And I guess my question is there a way? Is there a way for us to do this through a different zone rather than trying to squeeze something into an existing zone?
I'm open.
And whether or not that would be the appropriate way to do it.
I think
And if that would
it's
give us
something
more
that we can look
control,
at,
then
but I
better.
think that could be a long process, and one that certainly we can look at. But one thing I know that, or at least I'm assuming, is that the applicant on this is doing this because it's going to help them be able to fill some space.
Yeah, and there's a dance studio that wants to, but
And
I really don't want to be a stick in the mud
Right.
to any of that.
And
I'm really supportive of all of those things. But even all of that positive feeling I have on all the things I really want to vote to support this, I'm not sure that this particular setup adequately addresses the concerns that I have. And I just don't think it's fair to not articulate those things, right? I felt I had a responsibility to speak up about that, so.
If I may, just maybe read a few of the standards from the conditional use ordinance. So the ordinance says, the following standards shall apply to the approval of a conditional use. And I won't read through them all, but here are a few I think that address the concern. The suitability of the specific property for the proposed use. So we do have an opportunity of looking at exactly a particular property and seeing if it really fits that particular location. The development or lack of development adjacent to the proposed site and the harmony of the proposed use with the existing uses in the vicinity. Whether or not the proposed use or facility may be injurious to potential or existing development in the vicinity. The present and future requirements for transportation, traffic, water, sewer, and other utilities for proposed site and surrounding uses. So there are...
Let me explain my concern with that.
Sure.
And again, I want to make sure that I talk about this in the appropriate order, and I'm sorry, guys, I don't want to drag this out into this major thing. If they are going into a building that right now could be empty or sparsely populated, then we have the ability to look at the conditional use for them. The problem is all of these other uses that are permitted uses could create the conflict. And then we don't have the ability because those are permitted, not conditional. I almost wish it was reversed so that it was permitted for the dance, but it was conditional for the other stuff, right? And that's where my conflict is that we're setting this up so that there potentially could be a permitted use to put something right next to them that we couldn't, or the planning commission couldn't reasonably object to.
I agree, and I'll just say, I 100% respect your concern about this, because anytime there's little kids running around, it's a safety concern. But I think it already exists. I think we have a DBAT facility. I think we allow entertainment. I think we allow all these things already, and just because it's tweaked a little bit differently in the language, it means they can't come in. I think there's it creates inequality there, in my opinion.
I understand.
And so for me, it's difficult to say no to this because we already are allowing that. Now, I think that, in my opinion, and I hate always going against the Planning Commission. I appreciate what they're trying to do, is highlight these things. But I think that I think that we have a good conditional use ordinance. I think that and I think we have a really good Planning Commission. So I think that they're going to systematically look through those. And I don't disagree with you, but I do also believe that as a business owner, if you are running a dance studio and you have something coming next to you that is going to seriously jeopardize the safety of your students, I think you're probably going to bring that to the city, or I think you're going to talk to your landlord and say, I can't participate here. I have to leave this facility because the uses are not compatible. I'm on a conditional use, they're on a permitted, and I have to look out for the safety of my clients, right? So I think that some ways it should work itself out that way. And I don't want to dismiss your concerns about it. They're very valid. But
the problem is, sure, I agree with everything you said. I've agreed with Clint and I'm not in disagreement with any of your sentiments about this and the importance of it. I mean, Pandora's box has been opened. There's already personal instruction going on. I don't think we're hurting anything by putting this in there. Does that make sense? I don't have any reason to say no to permitting the dance studio there. But even permitting it there, I would hate to see that I'm permitting or supporting something that could create a safety issue for young children. And that, I don't know that that's been fully mitigated, but that's for me, that's why we have a whole council to make these decisions, right? So.
Understood. Valid point.
Further discussion? Further input further from you, Michael?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
This is on for action, if we do want to take action on this item. I'm happy to accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion on this item, and I just want to make a comment. I think Sherry's point was very valid, and the question that she asked Mike about, redundancy in there, and I think we do have a very robust plan in place for how these conditional uses are are reviewed and vetted. So I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2020-32, authorizing a land development code amendment to permit personal instruction services as a conditional use in the M1 zone. But I will not include the additional language proposed or recommended by Planning Commission.
So after the comma in red and underlined?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Steve?
I'm going to abstain, and I'll explain in a minute.
Okay. Just so you know, on record, Jackie's going to look at me. When you abstain, it is considered a no.
I understand.
But that,
But I wanted to be specific.
no, yeah, I've done the same. So I will vote yes, and I will reserve comment on my vote here in just a minute. So it sounds like there's a couple people who want to make comments, so that motion does pass. I'll turn the time over to Steve in regards to his vote.
So just for the benefit of the applicant and everybody else, I felt pretty strongly based on the comments of the council this was going to pass, and I didn't think that my vote would make a difference one way or the other. But I also didn't want to vote no. I support businesses coming into our community. I'm really excited about this dance studio coming in. I think it's going to be great, and I'm all of the positive things that were said. I couldn't vote no against it, but because of my safety concerns, I couldn't necessarily vote yes for it. So that was the reason why my abstaining vote. And I know it counts as a no, but I'm
It's
glad.
okay.
I'm actually glad that it passed, but.
Sherry, Clint, do you have comment on your vote? Okay.
Nope.
I do just want to quickly comment that I absolutely understand your concerns, Steve, and I don't hold anything against you. Do I cautiously vote? I cautiously voted yes on this item, not because I think there's anything wrong with it, more so because I think we have to be careful anytime we start making changes to our zoning that involve moving children into zones that we wouldn't normally put them in. So in this particular case, I don't think that we are making that big of a change. However, in the future, I think it might be appropriate for us to look at maybe an M2 zone or something additional that would be a better fit for things like, recreation and personal instruction that is more of a business type center that allows for light manufacturing, may not be the right word, but very extremely light manufacturing or sales or things like that, that is a little bit more compatible and avoids that issue in the
I
future.
would really support the development of that as well.
So,
Thank you.
all right, so that motion passed. We will move on to item 10.1, discussion and appointment of an city manager. This is the last item on our agenda. It is my understanding that we might go into closed session before we finish discussing this particular item. Chase.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So really, this is your item. I'm here to answer questions and provide recommendations and guidance as you go through this discussion. As you recall, Wendy has been filling the position of interim city manager. 2 weeks ago, we discussed reconvening a meeting to readdress the official appointing of a more permanent interim city manager while the council goes through the hiring process for a full-time city manager. Again, this is your time to kind of discuss how you want to engage in that procedure of appointing an interim city manager. My recommendation to you would be that you use the open meeting to discuss some of the qualifications you'd like to see, what you'd like to see accomplished in this time, maybe who that person would be, and then as you want to move into the period of discussing the qualifications of individuals, that be done in a closed meeting.
Okay.
We have properly noticed that, so if it comes to a point where you're ready to begin discussing individual qualifications of a person, you can, again, bring that up in a closed meeting and even conduct a quasi-interview in a closed meeting.
Okay. So before we get into that, unless the council has objections, when we get to that point, just so staff is aware, I'm going to ask that when we get to that specific point, that we have all staff, with the exception of our city attorney, leave the chambers to allow us to discuss frankly, and then we will invite individuals back as we see fit. But we do ask that the executive staff remain in the building so that if so needed, we can invite you back in to discuss further as needed.
Maybe if I could provide some additional insight, I think it may be helpful for council to understand what the process of hiring a city manager will look like, as none of you were on the council when our last city manager was appointed. But this is really one of the sole administrative, it is a legislative action, but it appears to be an administrative function that you serve of hiring an individual to fill that position. That can take, 2 months, or it can take a year. And it really depends on you. I know you've been provided a copy of the job description. Some changes have been made to that. It's ready to be posted at any time when we receive the direction to do so. And that position can be left open until filled. It can be open for a period of time and then closed, and then interviews begin after that time. And the hiring process after that can, again, be as short as a few weeks or a few months, depending on the candidate pool and how we decide to proceed with that. So I think that's useful information to have in mind as you discuss, again, the qualifications and the procedure of appointing an individual to serve as the interim city manager.
And just to be clear, that this discussion is not noticed for the job description, it is for the interim city manager. Is there a conflict with us discussing both?
I think it's related enough that it can be discussed at this time as well. Again, because it is all, in my perspective, connected to who we decide, or who you decide to have fill that interim city position.
Beautiful, I love
interim
it.
city manager position.
Okay, so I guess the time's up to us. What do you guys, thoughts? Who wants to go first?
So I think there's two discussions to have. I think, as Chase has alluded to, I think there's one is, well, maybe three discussions. One is what we need to do as far as the job descriptions for the permanent city manager and how we go through that process. Second thing is what timeframe, what is the interim city manager, right? How we're going to handle that, who we want to consider for that, somebody in staff, outside of staff, how long that would take, what do we do in the meantime, all those kind of things. And then there's the discussion of a specific appointment that would be the closed door discussion, I think, where we'd get into specific individuals and talking about competency issues and things like that, which I think would be appropriate behind closed doors. So that being said, I think that the long-term city manager thing, or at least portion of this discussion, that's a complex issue. And I think that it behooves us to take a little time. I appreciate the job description that's been offered. I think it's a great start. Actually, I think it's a really great start. I think that we should have time to digest this a little more fully. I know Jared is very eager to be a part of this conversation and at least outlining the job description going forward. I'm not saying anything to try and say we should hold something up so that he can be here tonight. But all of that being said, I don't know that we have to come up with any conclusion or answer tonight. I don't even know if we need to do it within 2 weeks. I do think that there's something that definitely by mid-November, late November, I think we really need to have it nailed down and done. Maybe I would say no longer than whatever our last meeting in November is. I think we should really have this.
We only have one
We
in
only have
November.
one.
So.
It is the November 18th,
Yeah.
so that gives us, a month or so. And I think that's probably appropriate a time for us to narrow down the job description for the permanent position.
If I can just make a quick comment,
Yeah,
Steve. I know as we've had a few emails going back and forth with regards to it, there's been some great input that has been made already by members of the council. But I know that there was a question asked too about, do we want to really consider this tonight, or do we want to 2 weeks? And I know I responded really much in line with what you just said, and that is that I would really like the next 2 weeks I don't think we, again, to your point, we have to make a decision by the next meeting, but I would like to see it specifically on as an agenda item.
I would agree.
On the 28th for us to discuss and allow us each the time to really look in, to be able to do some emails with our city attorney, with other staff members and those types of things. To your point, to really fully dive into what's currently in front of us and have some time to research what's out there in other cities in terms of those roles and responsibilities. But I would like some of that time as well.
And Clint, if I might add one more piggyback onto that is, as part of the agenda, I think it would be appropriate for us to kind of outline and understand, maybe get some input and give some feedback on the process, how we go about actually define the position and then go through the process of how we're going to fill that position.
Absolutely.
Timeframes, expectations, those kind of things. So
I would suggest that as we put that agenda item on there, that we plan to have Travis in attendance for that one to really talk about from the HR perspective,
And if
some
I,
guidance on the process along with our city attorney.
if I could make a recommendation too, or rather yeah, it'll be a recommendation.
It's okay, you're allowed to.
Thank you. Is this can also be a special city council meeting, and I know we don't love adding additional meetings, but I do think that there is benefit in coming here with a clear mind, unadulterated by any other agenda items, just focused on this one thing, important item, right? And that could be obviously scheduled between everyone and still be done in an open meeting format, but again, given the importance of this position
and as we don't have a meeting for a month, well, I guess we do have a meeting here at the end of October, but I mean, there's a big time frame in there for us to schedule something else in November.
I know.
And have a meeting if we needed to do that. I appreciate that
Yeah.
suggestion, Chase.
And I know that we, next week is fall break for school kids.
Yeah.
We intentionally canceled our, what would be an additional work meeting for next week to allow each of us to take advantage of that. So I appreciate the input by Chase. I would suggest that we at least put it on for the 28th, and at that point, we may decide that, we do want a special council meeting at that point
I agree.
to be able to really dive into the specifics and details and spend the appropriate time on it, and we may be able to do that between then and obviously the November 18th meetings. So.
Wendy, did you have a question?
Just really a comment. So you're running into the holidays.
Yeah.
And so my, I guess I have a recommendation.
You're allowed.
If I'm allowed, to not actually do the posting until after Christmas, until after the new year, because you're just not going to get applicants.
Nope.
Okay, and that gives us more time as well,
Yeah,
right?
that gives you a lot more time.
Okay.
Just a thought.
I think it's appropriate.
So in the matter of the job description itself, I think we've come to an agreement that we'll push that forward to the dates that we've specified. Does staff have any questions or concerns or need for further input?
No, we'll plan on it on the 28th, and then if you want to have a special council meeting or push it to another meeting, we're happy to do that, just like any other item that comes to work session.
Okay.
Table that part of the discussion.
Okay, next.
I guess the second part of the question then is interim city manager.
Can we start, and I think it was part of one of the, I can't remember who brought it up, is just talking about, I think it's very appropriate for us as a council body to discuss, at least right now, expectations.
Yeah.
Of what that interim, because it is, we're in a challenging time in the city, we're in a challenging time with the pandemic, we're in a challenging time because we're coming up on the holidays. So I think there's a lot of things to at least consider there, and a lot of things for a potential interim candidate to consider as well. And I think that that's something that at least, not that they have to be vastly different or lengthy or anything, but at least it's an opportunity for us to really very clearly articulate what our expectations are of that potential person over the next little while. And with that being said, honestly, mine are pretty easy. And I try and, even in my professional career, I try and make it pretty easy. And I think everyone who is the potential.
I think there's a firefighter joke in there somewhere, but
yeah. Everyone who is the potential for this person, I think those are individuals that already have a good grasp on what the responsibilities of the city manager are. So I don't think we need to belabor them. The only thing I would add to that is given the current circumstances that we're in and given the challenges that come as a result of those challenges is that we're in, the expectations that I would at least put out there for consideration is one, that they put an immense focus on the employee group themselves, and that is maintaining the culture that has been built here and finding ways to strengthen and build upon the culture that is built here and not allowing the work that's went into that to slip or degrade in any manner. So to, again, maybe a little extra focus on culture. And two, and that is they're aware of all of the goings on of the city already and the applications that are in front of us, the discussions, the MDAs, all of those things. We need to find a way, obviously, to keep all of those moving and maybe even address some that we haven't gotten to recently. But along with that, I want them, again, knowing what the responsibilities of the job are, and that is to address items that need to be addressed as they come up. I don't want things, because it's in this interim status, and sometimes that brings with it, maybe a little bit of a negative connotation that maybe that person might just be the substitute for a little while and doesn't have to address things fully as they come up, and that's not what I want to have happen in this point. I want whoever is appointed in that position to know that, at least for me, and obviously I want you guys to weigh in, the expectation is that that's your job to do, address the items as they come up. Don't let things linger or wait to pass them off to the next guy if they come up. But let's keep business moving. Allow everyone to do their jobs, which I know they've done a fantastic job at doing. Let's keep things moving forward, so that we don't start whoever the selection is for our new city manager coming in with this complete backlog of things that have been waiting for that person to come in. That's pretty much all I have.
Fill the role of a city manager. Just because the word interim is ahead of it does not mean that you don't have the full responsibility to take care of what needs to be taken care of in the city.
Absolutely.
I be the city manager as we would expect any city manager to be, whether or not you're interim or not. You're a city manager for the time being. And that's I think every one of the people that I know I would be considering tonight fully understands that that's the expectation and is capable of doing those things.
Yep. I think we have fantastic senior staff in the city. I think we have multiple capable people.
Absolutely.
That can step into that role and do a fantastic job in continuing to move us forward. Honestly, the main thing it comes down to me as we I guess get into more of the deliberation side of it is if there's somebody that really doesn't want it, that I may be.
I have some input on that, so.
And I do too.
As do all of us.
Yeah, I do too. But again, I think that as we do the deliberation, we need to keep in mind that I think it's essential that we be respectful of the individuals and make sure that we're not saddling somebody with something that they may not be completely comfortable with moving forward. And there's other factors to be considered in that moving forward as well. I know that the thought and idea has been expressed, and of looking at making the interim position somebody that may not apply for that position moving forward. And I think anybody can make arguments on both sides of that, but I think that there is some wisdom in considering that as well moving forward.
Yeah. And I want to speak plainly, but I'm also going to
be cryptic.
We have to be sensitive to some of the issues. So, in response to your comments about maintaining and building upon the culture, I would agree with that about 95%. There are so many awesome things that happen in the city. There's so many great people. There's so many just really wonderful things. And I don't think it's inappropriate or wrong to say that so many of those good things are attributable to somebody who's not here anymore. I don't think we don't want to take any of the good things away that have been done in our city. But part of the reasons in making a change is that we want changes to be made. And I don't necessarily know that that's a cultural thing per se, but I think that there are changes that will impact parts of the culture, if that makes sense.
That's fair.
And so I hope you don't take that as a disagreement, but maybe as an amendment to what you were suggesting. We definitely need to keep the train on the track. And I don't know that drastic changes being made now would be fair to a new city manager coming in who might have a different perspective, or we might jointly decide, hey, we have some new ideas we want to implement in the hiring of the new city manager, right? So I don't want to necessarily say, all right, interim city manager, have at it, just go crazy. But on the other hand, I want to have them to have full authorization to, I think what you said was, address items that need to be addressed, right? And be fully empowered and supported by this council to take what actions are appropriate to be taken right now. I'd be willing to entertain and listen and hear suggestions and ideas about more larger scale or more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not substantial, but more, sorry, I'm old. Just on a little bigger scale, right? A little more ambitious changes. If I think the council's on board with that and the city manager feels those are really important, I think we can collaborate and agree on some of those bigger changes. But I don't want somebody to be lame duck, but I also don't necessarily say make dramatic changes when somebody in 6 months could come in and have a.
No, I agree.
We don't want to take our team this way and then go this way. I don't want that either, right? And so that being said, I'm going to just express that I've had conversations about the idea about possibly trying to find somebody from the outside to fill the interim position. And I'm not necessarily against that. However,
I think that creates,
I think
introduces
it's
all those issues.
yeah, I think it adds disruption into the culture, right? That maybe more than our staff could take or should take right now. I also think that somebody coming into that position, it takes so much time to even figure out what's happening in the city, who's got their fingers in what the responsibilities are, how things are working, who's doing what. That by the time they even really got a good footing here, they might be out of the position and not really empowered to do anything anyway. So my feeling has been leaning towards finding somebody from our internal staff to fill that position. And depending on the time frame we come up with and the input we get, that if this is going to be a 6 or 9 month or a year-long process, we might revisit that and say, somebody's interim for 60 or 90 days, and then we might look at a more, robust, experienced person to fill in so that we're not, again, to your point, having somebody spend 9 months in a job they really don't want.
Yeah. So in regards to that, I think that having any sort of this person may not be the interim manager for the duration, only adds uncertainty and distrust. I would be very much against, say 60 or 90 days from now, we're going to there's a possibility of pulling you out.
But let's say that we tonight said, okay, we feel really strongly we want to get somebody from the outside. We have to finish the job description. We have to post it. We have to interview. We have to go through the process. So we are saying we're going to be making a change, right?
Are you talking for the interim?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll just tell you right now, I'm not in favor of bringing someone from the outside for the interim.
I'm not necessarily in favor of it, but if somebody can make the case that I'm saying, okay, I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea either, right?
Well, and I'll tell you, I'm same as Clint. For the interim, I think it's important that the continuity is held by those who are already doing the job, who already know all those reasons you gave. That there's people who nobody's gonna get up from the outside in time and be up to speed in time for us to be done. There's just I don't see any value in bringing somebody from the outside for the interim. We can talk about the long-term later, but, for now.
And I appreciate, but I do think there is value. I think there's great value in having somebody from the inside. I think there is value from somebody on the outside. I don't want to diminish the contribution that a fresh pair of eyes and some fresh energy could bring, right? There's potential for some really positive things with that too.
Yeah.
But I want to acknowledge that doing that has some risks and some complications with it as well, right? So that's why I'm saying I'm not necessarily advocating for that.
Okay.
But I don't want to oppose it as an option for us.
Okay.
Because I think there could be some benefits from that.
I agree to that. I don't want to close off the possibility of bringing someone in from the outside, and I'll tell you some of the reasons why.
For the interim or for the?
For the interim.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have been just super, super pleased and I don't know the word right now, but grateful for the job that Wendy has been doing filling that role. So any of my comments would not be reflective on that at all. Please understand that, because she's been amazing. But and I can see the points that are bouncing back and forth here about being up to speed and things like that. But the good thing about this team and this staff and this culture is they know what their jobs are, right? So it can continue to flow. And so if you bring someone in from the outside to fill that position, as long as they're the right person, as long as they have the experience, city manager experience, that type of experience to where they can kind of hit the ground running with knowledge of how cities work, and they can team up with a team that's already knows their jobs and move along. Because in my mind, I don't think that we stop what's happening in the city. I'm not proposing that at all. But in my mind, it's an interim position, and the job right now is just to keep the city moving forward, but maybe not make big explosive changes to the city, because I think that that's a direction that we need to work with the new city manager on to understand. I think that we need to do some internal things, looking at different things, what works great, what doesn't, you know what I mean, and just feel comfortable with certain things, and then allow that the person who will be permanently in that position to move forward. I just simply believe that we shouldn't close off the opportunity to that. If you say, give me a name, I don't have a name, no clue right now, you know what I mean? And so there might not even be that possibility. I don't know. But I'm hoping that we don't close the opportunity, because maybe Wendy wants to go back to her job she likes to do and is normal doing, you know what I mean? Yeah. I just think that we have a good team that I'm not saying that position isn't important, but I think that they can bring them up to speed fairly quickly and keep the city moving forward, as long as that person is qualified in that type of job, that has the experience, can come in with the experience to move the city forward.
And to clarify for you, Sherry, the reason I made the comment is I was not in favor is because, honestly, I don't have anybody.
I hear you.
First off,
No,
and
I know.
two, it feels like going through a process to try and find an interim would be just as.
From an outside source is almost the same as
Yeah.
going through the hiring process. Yeah, I
And-
Well,
totally
it becomes
agree.
it becomes the
Test run.
The test run is what it
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, no, I don't disagree. It's like if there's somebody that you go, no, that makes sense, that's a good fit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just didn't want to close that door on that, because I think that we can functionally move forward well.
I would like the body here to take a moment and think about the specific things they need out of our interim city manager. One for me specifically, so that I can give direction to the people that are listening. That is really, I think, going to be really important, is communication. We need to have increased level of communication during this time. Regular emails to the council, and I'm not talking, 50-page essays every day, but I am talking, we need to know what's going on so that we can help get on board and address those issues, as is our responsibility in certain cases, so that we know what's going on, we know the things that are happening, and that we don't get in a situation where somebody comes up to us and we don't know what's going on. So for me, communication is probably one of the most important things, because that's one of the ways that we will be able to know that the ship is running straight and true, that we're following that point, moving forward, but staying on the course that's been laid out for the city.
Can
Mayor,
I
I
ask you a
don't.
specific question too about that is, in reference to some of the changes in communication you've seen in the past couple of weeks, is that reflective of what your level of expectation is, or do you have a different level of expectation than what we've been getting? Because
It's much
I'm really
better.
excited about what we're getting so far.
It's much better. I think that I love the regular long updates, and I would like to see maybe very short daily updates of changes. Just quick bullet points of some changes that we may need to be aware of on, for that particular day. So I'm not asking for a 50-page essay every day, but I'm asking for, quick bullet point, this happened, this is moving forward, those kind of things, and that could even be put in a smart sheet that just gets updated on a regular basis so that we have access to it, and then just, it's been updated.
No, I think that's fair. Sorry, Clint, I didn't mean to.
No, and that's fine. And I just want to clarify. I think I understand exactly what you're saying, but I don't think, I want to be clear that I don't think that our communications team has not been doing a fantastic job.
No, they do an amazing
communicating.
job.
Because I think I think when you're talking communications, it's very easily to blur those lines of what we're talking about because of the roles and responsibility in the city. Because I think we have had, in terms of issues in the city and communications to our,
Yes,
I think we have
yes.
had amazing communications in that regards. And I think that in terms of communications to the council, I think we had good communications before, but I am very appreciative of the communications we've had over the past couple of weeks. I don't want to, whoever selected, I don't want to burden them down
just
either,
communication.
at the same time of feeling like I have to report to the council every single night,
And-
because honestly, I wouldn't want to.
It
And
feels
I
like
think you're hitting it
micromanaged.
right on the head. You're helping clarify something. I'm not looking for, every day. I'm just, when there's changes, when there's things that we
Yeah.
need to be made
I
aware
think
of,
that there's
we need to get
pertinent
it.
things, and we all know some of the status of the things that are going on, and we know that they're meeting and doing those things. Those clarifications, whether whether they feel like things have changed on a daily basis, they need to do it, I really want to leave it up to that person's discretion. They know the important things that the council needs to hear and should hear, and that they can make the determination whether that's every other day, every third day, and maybe, you know what, there's just so much going on in a week that I'm just going to give you a big dump at the end of the week,
And if
because that's what my schedule will.
And if that's what it comes to, I mean, we always have the option of calling this,
We
the
can call.
interim city manager and be like, hey, I need an update, and it'd be, they'll think we're a pain in the butt, but that's what we're,
What I don't want to, this is a challenging time for everybody. What I don't want to do
is to burden them with.
I don't want to micromanage.
That was my thought
But
too.
I don't wanna
It feels like micromanaging. If
Yeah.
you're requesting that every day, it's like, you got to report in every day. But if they're just freely, when time allowed, then they're sending out. I very much have appreciated the information so that's been coming, because it just keeps me in the loop, but I don't need to be micromanaging that. I just need to, oh, thank you. It helps me know what's going on.
I think part of the point of me making this comment was not to say what we've had in the last 2 weeks hasn't been sufficient. It absolutely has been sufficient. However, that came from one specific individual, and
Yeah.
that specific individual knows what we want. I want to make sure that any
His
possible
expectation.
candidate that we're looking at knows that expectation, because the point here is we have to set that expectation now so that they know what they're getting into. And so that was the point behind that comment. It's not to micromanage,
Sure.
I know that we've got the communication, we know where it's at, we like it. I want to make sure it continues.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Any other thoughts about specific needs of the council in regards to the interim?
No, I think my expectations are kind of the same thing I said to Wendy, just continue just to keep the ball rolling, the city keeps functioning. As we move into winter, the streets get plowed, the bills get paid.
Oh yeah, please make sure the streets get plowed.
The
That
bills
is
get
absolutely.
paid, and just the functioning jobs that the city has been doing just continues to move forward.
While Steve has stepped out, I don't know if he has any additional, but I'm personally ready to go in to start talking about specific individuals. So I would be ready to accept the motion to move into closed.
I'd wait on him because you need 4 for this vote.
We need 4, or do we need 3?
2/3 to go into closed.
So 2/3 would be 2.
In the event of someone being absent, you still have to have a full.
You still have to have, okay,
Still
so
have
we
to have
still, if he doesn't vote, okay, so we will wait just a moment for Steve to return, and then we have the vote.
Do you agree with me on that, Jackie?
I'm afraid if we were to tell staff right now,
There
anyone
you
not
go.
interested can get up and leave now that we
They'd
have
all walk
nobody
out.
left in the room.
Why do you think I specified ahead of time I wanted everyone to wait in the building? Because it was my understanding that it was, once somebody's out, once the vote begins, that it's only the members present at the time of the vote.
That may be in our rules.
But it doesn't matter because Steve is back.
How about we vote now?
How about we vote now? So I'll accept a motion to go into closed. We're arguing whether you had to be here or not.
I'll make a motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to convene in closed session for the purpose to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual and pending or reasonable imminent litigation as provided by Utah Code annotated 52-4-205.
I'll second that.
Motion is second. Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. Once again, if we could please have all individuals leave the room with the exception of the city manager. We ask that our executive staff please remember.
Did you mean city attorney?
City attorney. City attorney, but we do ask that you remain in the building.
Well, and Jackie.
You can do whatever you do, Jackie.
Hey, Jackie, will you, Jackie?
So is this the time where we say we want Jackie to be the city manager?
Yeah, Jackie? Jackie?
Hey, Jackie, will you stay and keep the recording going just so we can talk about litigation first and then cut it off? And you okay with that?
She says she's staying regardless.
Litigation first.
Did we
that way-
notice litigation?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's been a day, guys.
Yeah. Any news on your house?
They're ripping off my walls right now. They're literally ripping up carpet, ripping the walls off.
Poor wife, man.
It is what it is.
Kids probably think it's cool, but
Once we get through litigation, well, if we're talking about litigation, do we need Wendy and Tammy to stay?